Okay. Karibuni tena ndani ya One Mic Show. Na ni furaha kujiunga nanyi wapenzi wasikilizaji, tukiwa tumekuandalia taarifa za kusisimua, mziki wa kata viungo na kindumbwe cha siasa au politics ukipenda. We are streaming live from on Facebook in Kilimanjaro studios outside Washington DC. We will shortly be going live on YouTube, so please call in all your YouTube friends. And please remember to subscribe to both our YouTube and Facebook pages at The One Mic Show. And then follow us on Instagram at One Mic Show. And we are also going to be taking live calls tonight on 202-683-4570 and press *5 to speak, so save that number. Now later tonight, we'll be asking how immigrant parents can better understand their children born in the United States. What are some avoidable mistakes that lead to irreparable damage in relations between first-gen parents and their second-generation adult kids? Please drop a comment right now below to tell us how you feel about this conversation and maybe mistakes that you may have made as a parent, or if you're a second-gener also, just tell us a few mistakes you think your parents made so you can get started on the comments right now. Na bila kusahau, tapokea mziki toka DJ wetu machachari mleta habari DJ Moshfire, na tunadunda kule viwanjani na Mika Ocheze yake nambari 7 mgongoni akituletea habari za michezo. Na moja kwa moja toka Kilimanjaro studios ni mimi mtangazaji na mwanahabari wako mpendwa Ali Badawi. Kwetu wanaanita mteule na wengine mniite mjukuu wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui na sibagui. Karibuni.
Now, let's talk politics.
Again, we're taking another break from politics, but this hour we'll be talking to a second-gen Kenyan Annette Karanja regarding the frosty relations between first and second-generation Kenyans in the U.S. She'll be highlighting misconceptions, assumptions, and major blind spots regarding second-gen Kenyans by the older generation that came to the U.S. as adults. So please start dropping your questions and views in the comment section below. And I'm your co-host and producer, Ali Badawi. It's Friday the 4th of August, and we are streaming live from Kilimanjaro studios outside Washington, D.C. So please remember to subscribe to our One Mic Show YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at One Mic Show. On panel with me tonight is Mr. One Mic Kamakawa. Our sports anchor Mika Och might be out tonight, and our resident DJ Omoshfire will be live on the decks, as you've already been hearing the music. And also not forgetting super producer Bwana Mubelwa Bandio. Now we're going to get started right away because we have so much to cover tonight. Now, the story of Kenyan immigration to the U.S. is a tale spanning almost 70 years. The first wave starting from the 50s through the 70s saw the famous airlifts bring the likes of Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai to study in the United States. Now, the pre- and post-independence generation, according to the Migration Policy Institute, commonly came to the U.S. for higher education. They then returned to live and work in the newly formed republic. Other notable beneficiaries of the airlifts included former Vice President Professor George Saitoti and former cabinet ministers Arthur Magugu and Zachary Onyonka. Now, contrary to popular belief, the dad of the former U.S. President Barack Obama Sr. was not a beneficiary of the airlifts. He received private funding to attend the University of Hawaii. Now, coming to the 80s and 90s, the trend started shifting to permanent migration following factors that included a weak economy, corruption and violent conflicts around elections, and other issues that were happening at the time. Now, research also from the Migration Policy Institute indicates that the number of Kenyan-born residents in the U.S. in 1980 was less than 10,000, a number that pales in comparison to the current estimate of over 200,000 Kenyans. Now, a new wave of Kenyans attending U.S. colleges and beneficiaries of America's legal permanent residency programs also emerged starting from the mid-90s through the 2000s. Now, these newer generations that started raising families in the U.S. brought a new breed of American-born Kenyans who range in age currently from toddlers to grown adults in their mid-30s. Now, tonight, we are privileged to host a second-generation Kenyan Annette Karanja in studio, who's been here before. It's not her first time in Kilimanjaro. Now, Annette's family moved to Baltimore, Maryland in the mid-90s, where she still currently lives. She's a political activist who focuses on social justice and economic and political rights for immigrants. Now, Annette was recently appointed by Baltimore County Mayor Johnny O to the New American Task Force, so she'll tell us more about that a bit later. She also has a passion in political mobilization and assisting Kenyans access government services. Annette is here today to talk to us about misconceptions, assumptions, and blind spots that first-gen Kenyans have regarding her generation that was raised here in the United States. Annette, welcome back to Kilimanjaro Studios and welcome to the One Mic Show.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Okay, all right. We always love having you here because you always bring that fresh, different perspective from the energy that we typically have here. And you'll also remember that the last time you are here, that was back in October, I had a minor voice mishap.
You did?
Yes.
Was it minor?
It was minor.
You were completely absent that day, but let's call it minor.
Yes, it was a minor voice.
Was he absent?
It was a surprise. I was present, then I became absent.
Sat here.
Yeah.
I mean, he just couldn't speak.
I was present, and then I became
couldn't even
absent
stay for
all of a
moral
sudden.
support.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, what would you be doing that you're... Anyway.
Anyways, we forgive you. It's understandable.
Okay,
Things
all right.
happen.
Okay, and
can't.
thank you so much for being a good sport, because sometimes these things happen and you have to deal with them when they happen.
On the fly.
Okay, all right. But what have you been up to since last October when you were here?
The last time I was here, there was the eminent election that was happening in November. That was super important for me to just get individuals involved in the election process and get them to vote. I'm so excited to see, based off of the numbers, although we don't have specific for the Kenyan demographic, but I do know that specifically we have younger individuals who voted, whether it's because of the specific questions that were on there. Marijuana, for example, was a big one that was on there in Maryland, in the state of Maryland. I do know that there was a larger, younger demographic, and I mean people in their 20s and 18s to 20s who voted. I also know that there are regions who had some changes in their representation because an influx of individuals who are categorized as new Americans, which is a controversial term, but let's use it for the time being.
Okay.
And these are individuals who might be immigrant born and or second generations who might not have voted as consistently. Most of us vote for the presidential election, even American born for many generations. But this last election, we had an uptick in participation. And so that was very exciting to me because I know that it's small organizations such as Hakazetu, which I'm a part of, and other organizations promoting and educating individuals that allowed for new voters. And that's really my passion, is a new voter, someone coming out to the polls, because your opinion matters. At the end of the day, if you don't vote, if you don't vote, there are people who are making decisions on your behalf.
Okay.
And I believe that you should have access to and or an understanding of how that process works.
Okay, that's amazing. So you're involved in elections, and then you also got appointed to the new task force
Yes.
by Baltimore County Ambassador Johnny O. Just briefly tell us what the task force is about and how you got appointed.
And are there any tenders for Kenyans?
Okay, so Baltimore County is in a unique position because they haven't had statistical information that helped us categorize the new American, which is people who are immigrant born and or came here because as an immigrant family, right? So these are also U.S. citizens who are here with parents who might be immigrant born. There hasn't been a significant statistical information to inform Baltimore County as to how large the demographic is and their contributions. So a study went out very recently based on a specific grant that went out for an independent organization. And what they found out is that all of the growth that has happened in Baltimore County since the pandemic has been because of new Americans, which are individuals who are immigrant born. So that means that Baltimore County was able to survive the pandemic because of individuals who are immigrants. That is the reason why businesses have been able to flourish.
Wow.
That is the reason why the economy has not struggled very much. And this is a trend that is actually historically, in my opinion, something that you can predict, but that's a deeper conversation for another day. Because of that, a task force was created.
Okay.
This task force is meant to be representative of multiple cultures that are represented in Baltimore County. A lot of times the demographics there are going to be people who maybe lived in the city at one point in time and then they went to the county for different reasons as they have upward mobility. So there is some reflection there. And that has been a really important position for me to be in because it gives the Kenyan demographic or the non-traditional African demographic, and what I mean by that is non-West African.
Okay.
Individuals who are not West African, the opportunity to have access to the input in which is going to dictate what type of legislation.
Why are you skipping West African? Sorry for interrupting you.
Because they are the typical demographics. So when you think of African, the statistics always include people who come from Nigeria, from Ghana, from, Cameroon, which actually is central.
Afrobeat.
These are the countries that are included, right?
Okay.
The problem is, the reason why they're included has to do with the way that statistics are taken for populations and the way that we come into these countries. So we have different visas. You can have statistics that will tell you the amount of people who come into the United States on a student visa, but they're not going to be as specific as to the regions in which they come specifically from the African continent.
Okay, that's
right?
interesting. And also, I think Pablo Nzengu is coming in so early today. Pablo, welcome to the One Mic Show. And he's asking...
That's our resident lawyer.
Yeah, he's our resident lawyer. He's asking why there's hesitancy for Kenyans in the U.S. to be involved in political processes, briefly, before we get to the conversation of the day.
Because for Kenyans, there is a uniqueness in the demographics that we have as far as, like our households, for example, you might have parents who are not green card holders. Maybe they came here on a student visa, H-1B, or whatever the case may be, right? And you have kids here. Those are U.S. citizens. So we have what we call mixed households, mixed status households, right?
Okay.
Being in that situation, it might be very uncomfortable for you to out yourself. It might be very uncomfortable to have these conversations and to be politically involved because maybe your children are the ones who are going to be voting and they're the ones who are going to be voting on your behalf. And that's a very vulnerable place to be as a person who's supposed to be able to protect and provide all of these things for your children. But your children are the ones who are able to vote and you're not. And you might have legal status in this country, but that still doesn't mean that you have the ability to vote. So I understand that there are some social issues that cause us to not participate politically. If we had a conversation about this, however, like some other demographics do, some of people who come from Latin American countries or Spanish-speaking countries have these conversations within their households in a way that allows them to actually leverage those who have the voting abilities for the benefit of their community. And my goal is to have this conversation so that those of us who are able to be involved politically are able to advocate for their communities. But not only that, those of us who are not able to vote, I want us to understand what rights we do have within this country, because there are things that you can do to be politically engaged in your communities, whether it's your very small municipality, local level, and state level, and beyond.
All right. Thank you so much. And I want to remind the listeners that you tuned into the One Mic Show, and we have Annette Karanja in the studio. Now, Annette, you've lived in the U.S. almost all your life, practically speaking. At what point as a child did it occur to you that you are different from the other kids, and that maybe even your family is different from the other families, like your neighbors and other places that you are interacting with people? At what point in your life did you start noticing this? Maybe how old were you?
As soon as I went into school, so pre-K.
Okay.
When you're in pre-K, before pre-K, my parents were able to dictate what my social environment was. Once I got into pre-K, it was whoever had, certain addresses, and they fed into the particular school that I went to. And that's when we were able to encounter differences. It also got more pronounced as far as my, being born somewhere else when it came to things like getting a driver's license, not even a passport, getting a driver's license. There's an experience there because the type of documents that you have to provide if you're a U.S. citizen are different than if you are not. And there is an assumption with your peers, we've grown up to each other with each other, we've gone through school since pre-K, that my experience is going to be the same as theirs, and it was not. There was a little bit extra that I had to do in order to get something as simple as a driver's license. And I know that even now with the ID system that they have put in place, it's a little bit more complicated than when I was getting my driver's license. So those are two significant moments that I can recall that I realized, you know what, I'm not exactly the same. We're in the same space. But in my house we speak different languages. In my house we eat different foods, and I have a different pathway in order to get basic rights that my peers have.
Okay, all right. That's interesting. What about your parents? Because it's when you realize that you're different. But at what point did you also start noticing that your parents are different from maybe other parents that you would see in school or in other places where you interacted with parents of your friends?
As soon as I was able to play outside, there were some parents who were like, "Oh yeah, you can go to so and so's house," or there was those of us who live in, I would say ethnic, but like, black neighborhoods. There was a woman who lived down the street who would sell ice cups or would sell candy from her house, and she just was like the community grandma. There was a hesitance with my family to go there and interact with that person, whereas the other kids in the street, it was just like, oh, that's the community grandma. We always, give her 25 cents. It was not even expensive. It was an opportunity for her to be a grandma of the community. And my parents were a bit more hesitant. They warmed up to it. She lived close enough so that my parents could observe, and we had rules. I couldn't go inside the house and things like that. But there was always a level of fear that as a child I wasn't able to identify what it was, but I did know that there was some sort of hesitance with the proximity with people who were not like me, which is unfortunate because there were not a lot of people like me. So it's a very isolating experience.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. Now, before I bring in the rest of the panel to this conversation, as we try to get to the meat and bones,
Yes.
Now as an adult, when did you start feeling like now your parents' generation, or maybe the older generation, or maybe the newer generation of Kenyans that had come to the US, at what point did you start noticing a disconnection? Because, of course, when you're young, you're with your family and with your family's friends most of the time. But at what point now as an adult, or maybe at what point did you start noticing that there's a clear disconnection between these two demographics?
I think comparison is a big factor. I have the opportunity to compare my experiences with the peers that I went to high school with. And I have the opportunity to compare with, people in my neighborhood, those that I interacted with, maybe those that I worked with. I specifically remember an interaction I had with a woman when I was going to prom. I went to many proms, so I can't specifically tell you which one it was, but let's say it was my sophomore or junior. I know it wasn't my senior year, so let's say it was my sophomore or junior year, and I was going either to junior or senior prom. And I was, meeting up at the location. Parents are there, and my father's widowed. He's working. He's taking care of 4 children. He was not a participant, and I didn't have, any aunties there or anything like that. So I'm there by myself. I got dropped off at this location, and everyone had their friends, their support. They're taking pictures. I mean, this is a version of it that's very different from the current Instagram world, where you have a whole production. So this is before the production was there, but there, like, I could very clearly see, like, this prom thing is a very big deal for them. And, they had sisters and aunties and moms who were involved in this process, whereas I did it by myself. And my father was a widow. And there was no one to hype me up or take me shopping for a prom dress and all of these. Like, I did all of that stuff myself. And one of the things that was I remember there was a thing that was very, that really stood out to me was I was at someone's house at one of these events, and we're getting ready before the limo comes, and there was an issue with the cut of my dress and the bra that I was wearing. And this lady was just like, no one in your house told you that there is an issue going on here.
Oh, wow.
So were you showing too much?
No. It's just like, so there are different bras that you wear for different dresses.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So it wasn't even necessarily that I didn't do anything inappropriate. I didn't have that audacity. But it was more so just someone who would have seen, like, the way I might look at my child and be like, oh, maybe, you need to wipe your face, or you need to do this. Like, there was clearly not that for me. So she looked at me and she was like, nobody saw you leaving the house and seeing that you needed to, like, pin your bra to the strap of your dress. And I had no answer I said nothing. I just looked at
Th-
her.
but that must have been very
How old
hurtful.
were you?
I'm going to be 15 or 14 or 15 years old when this happened. My mom died when I was just before I turned 14 years old. So there was no, like, my father, he did his job. He dropped me off at the place at the time that I told him, you know?
Yeah. Because you still got to go
and she
deal
just
with the
looked
other
at
three
me
kids.
And I think, thank God for Grace, she didn't push the issue, and she was just like, I got pins. She got pins in the back of her room, and
Wow.
she pinned my bra to my dress in such a way that it wouldn't pop out, in a way that was, you know, just not cute. Like, I mean, a very basic thing that me as a teenager didn't think about. You know, I just got dressed and went out, you know, did whatever. So these are moments where it was like, this is a very important thing to this culture. Prom is a very important thing. People are very involved when prom
Correct.
is a
Yes.
thing.
It's
Even the
a bunch
family
of
members
people.
dress up because it's an opportunity to dress up with your kid.
Take
And
pictures.
take pictures.
Yep.
You know, godmothers are
Sometimes
there and all that
the
stuff.
father
And so-
drives the limo or drives the kids.
I didn't have.
or
I personally did not have that experience. I went to a lot of proms, but I never had that full
experience
prom
where the parents
experience.
are involved.
Yes,
and
everything
everything.
that I had was borrowed from some other family.
Wow. And you know, like, these are the conversations that I think are important for parents to hear, because that's something that maybe probably your dad, you know, like, was not even on his mind at that particular time in his defense. And you also bring the interesting point that your dad was widowed. You know, like, at that time you said your mom died when you were age 14. Last week we actually hosted Deborah Uko, the author of Rough Silk, who, you know, like, had a single dad, not because the mom died, but just because the mom walked out on the family, and was giving all these interesting experiences of having a single dad. So that in itself is a story on its own.
It sure is.
That maybe we can talk about in another episode. But I just wanted to point out that comparison. And Pablo here is again asking, would you change anything from back when you realized that you were different? Have your views changed on any particular area or issue? I know that's a very deep question, but you can just
Deep, it's
answer it
also
in
vague.
yeah.
Because there's so many, like, I love specificity. There's so many things I could say about that. But what I will choose to answer is that in the time where there was a little bit of struggle with identity, as far as being African born or being different born, or being different born but not being white presenting, right? Because if you're from the UK, that's different from if you know are African. One thing that I know that has changed that I love is we have a very interesting pro-black movement that's going on. There's natural hair is a thing. Crown Act is a thing. Afro beats has taken over, whether they want to give us, you know, the accolades or not.
And Gengeton.
And Gengeton and Amapiano and all. There's so many things that are becoming a bit more mainstream that was not there when I was growing up. So being African before was it was like I was the introduction to Africa. Mind you, I'm not from Africa as the entire continent. I represent a very small population within a country. But it was now put on me to now be a representative in the entire continent when I was growing up. Whereas now I can say, you know what, I'm African. I'm very proudly from Kenya. My people hail from a certain place, and we speak these certain languages. And it's accepted, it's celebrated, and that's something that I have experienced as I've gotten older. As I've gotten older, me being me and having the identity that I've had, which has always been consistent, which I know that some people in this country do not have the opportunity to have, and I'm very grateful. I've been able to experience the part where it wasn't that great to the part where it's sought after even now, and there's a curiousness and an appreciation of my cultural background.
Okay, interesting. And I want to remind the listeners that you're tuned into the One Mic Show, and I'm your co-host and producer, Ali Badawi. Our guest tonight is U.S. political and cultural contributor Annette Karanja. She's here talking about the disconnect between second-gen American-born Kenyans with their older first-gen counterparts and parents. Now, Annette will, for those who don't know, Annette will officially be the voice of the second geners on the One Mic Show moving forward. She'll also be a contributor in American politics as we approach primary season for election 2024. So stay tuned for that. You'll be seeing a lot of her in Kilimanjaro studios. And we'll shortly be talking about some roadblocks the American born generation has in being understood by their Kenyan born counterparts. But before we continue, I wanna just quickly again introduce Mike ajasema kitu sana, and maybe just give us a quick update on some of the things that we're going to be talking about during the sports segment. Do we have our young man around? Is he going to be in the building again? What is he going to be talking about?
He better be in the building, because it has been a very interesting World Cup, Women's World Cup, with some serious
things happening.
Upsets.
Okay.
Serious.
Yes.
So Neyman is going to brief us down. Serious.
Yes.
It's like a nonsense.
Yeah.
So he's going to update us on that.
Yeah. And I think also Annette wanted to contribute to that conversation on on some, I think, pay gap issues. Real quick, just 1 minute.
Does she want that smoke?
Is that title 8?
Does she want that smoke?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
All right, let's
but she's been following the pay gap conversation with the American US female soccer team. So she's going to be saying a thing or two about that. Just give us a hint maybe of what you're going to be talking about.
I know that the U.S. women's team has been very successful historically, and usually, especially as Africans, we've been told that if you do well, you work hard, you put your head down, you do all this thing, then you're going to get the reward. And the U.S. American women's team has not experienced that previously. So I think it was May of 2022 that they came to a settlement. So we can talk a little bit about that and what the implications of that is, and also what the significance is for sports in general for women.
Okay, good. So that's going to be in the sports break. So stay tuned for that.
I hope Neyman is ready for that too.
I hope he's ready for that. Yeah. I hope he's ready for that.
Baptism by fire.
Yes, and I hope he's also familiar with those pay gap issues. If not, he better be
Googling.
Yeah, he better be going on maybe going
Wow.
Nowadays it's
Live
nowadays it's not Googling, it's chat GPTing.
Oh,
yes.
He's an intern.
Yeah.
You guys.
So is that intern? And your point being, Omosh?
We should be nice to him.
We should be nice to him. We should be passing the baton, which I'll talk about. We are
Yes.
passing the baton.
You guys are throwing him
Yes.
in the deep end
Listen.
without any floaters.
That's how some
Baptism
people
by
taught
fire.
how to
Yeah.
learn how to swim.
Thank
Some people
you.
learned how to
Thank
swim
you.
that way.
Thank you, Annette.
And we
Thank you.
survived.
Okay.
Thank you, Khan.
All
Like
right.
we could be nice. today.
All right. Yeah, and Pablo is welcoming you, Annette. Now that you're going to be part of the discourse here in Kilimanjaro
And
Studios.
Pablo is one of those guys you have to watch with, I'm just saying.
Be just
Kwa
be nice.
Kiswahili we say kwa jicho la tatu, with the third eye.
Na la nne pia.
Okay.
And then you need another person to watch him. And you watch him watching that person.
Okay. Okay, that's too much. Pablo is also saying
Levels.
African teams are also through to the knockout
Yeah.
stages. Hii kikombe imeenda
Except for Zambia.
Africa.
Imeenda.
Imeenda.
Hii imeenda kabisa.
But another African team that people are not talking about?
What?
Jamaica. And even Afro-Jamaican knows about it. Jamaica. Jamaica is also there.
It's interesting you said that because
Yeah.
I was very
Reggae
sad to
guys.
see Haiti
Yes.
did not.
But Haiti.
Yeah, Haiti did not make it through.
They tried,
Yeah.
Lakini they didn't make it. So
I think their group was just a little,
Zambia is the one that.
they were not set up properly.
I wanted to call
Zambia.
Colombia an African team, but I looked at the makeup. I did not like the mix, so we leave it as a South American team for now.
So are the French are African?
Actually, that now let's wait for the sports segment. Let's not exhaust that. All that is going to be discussed in the sports segment.
Zambia walichoma bet.
Hey,
Yes.
you guys need to listen. Wait and listen.
Okay, so we're going to
Zambia walichoma bet.
sports
You need
segment.
to wait to
Sports
listen to
segment,
that.
our intern is here, like reworking, like his presentation in the sports segment.
Chat GPT.
Chat GPT.
And keeping us young.
Okay.
This is a young one, right? So.
He's only 17 years old.
Okay.
Wow.
All
He
right.
is properly not only,
Yeah.
let's give him all of the credit of those 17 years. It's not only.
Okay. All right. He's 17
The
years old.
corrections that are happening live on air.
Okay. Sawa.
No, it's okay. We'll have to pull her over.
blind spot alerts.
The things to say.
Blind
things
spot
not to
alert.
say.
Blind
Yes.
spot alerts.
Yes.
We're going to have a lot of those tonight.
Nyuma ya tent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Haya, sawa.
See
Alright.
us after class.
Okay, sawa. Now, coming back to this conversation, I want to now come to the panel here. and in your interaction with younger Kenyans, some of you have kids. What are some major assumptions that you made about Gen 2 Kenyans that turned out to be wrong? Now, this question also goes out to the audience. I want you to tell us in the comment section, what is it that in your interactions with Gen 2 Kenyans you assumed and you turned out to be wrong? DJ Moshraya, let me start with you.
Wow. That's an interesting one. I think I would say picking up the language, say like Swahili or the mother tongue. You assume that they don't know, and you might be saying something with somebody else that you don't want them to hear.
Okay.
And then they like throw in a loose word in there in the same language, and it's pretty clear they understand
what you're saying.
And you may not have gone through the paces of, you've been around this kid for a while, and you may not have gone through the paces maybe of speaking to them in the language, but over time, it's like they've been picking this stuff up, but they've been keeping quiet. They don't say anything. Then the day when you decide that, okay, now you want to unleash something, and you might even be saying something about them.
They unload.
They unload.
Okay.
And you're like, hala? You mean this kid? And they're like, yeah. I've been speaking this thing. I understand.
That's quite interesting. It reminds me, like when I started driving, my mother never knew I knew how to drive. So like when I was 17, 18, there was a time when I think there was someone who had died and they needed an extra driver. A couple of my uncles knew, and I was just thrown in. Then my mom was busy insisting, no, he doesn't know how to drive.
In fact, he didn't have a license.
Yeah, you can't give him the car. And he was so mad that so many people knew that I could drive.
Little did she know.
But she didn't know. So it's the same thing, I think, with kids, where you're assuming, or maybe sometimes they don't speak the language, but because they're in a household that the language is constantly being spoken, so they can pick out, like some of the things that you say.
And they may even reply. You'll speak to them in that language and they reply in English. There's a way they do some translation in their heads. I don't know how they do it. And boom, they reply in English.
Yeah.
So, so you'll be busy having these conversations and they'll be talking to you and replying in English. And you're like, okay,
you're not supposed to know this.
How did this kid pick this stuff up? And it's not like, anybody has specifically been, but so they surprise you. And I think also, kudos to the parents who have the ability to do it, and I'm seeing a lot more with, I'd say, I'm gonna say that the parents who are either my generation or the generation behind me, who actually actively take their kids to Kenya, or even I'd say other Africans, they'll take them to whatever country it is over summer, for at least a month.
Yes.
And they do that religiously, to the point where the kids are even looking for, they're like, hey, look, I want to go see grandma. I want to go see grandpa. I want to go to Kenya. And so, they're looking forward to it. And that time they go, they hang out with their cousins. They play with their cousins. They speak the language. They eat the food. And so they pick up all of those things. So they see the gap that used to be there, in my opinion, looking on from outside.
Yeah.
It's
narrowed.
It's been, really extremely narrowed. And then also the other thing that's happening that I have seen is that there's a lot of literature that's available, that you don't have to take your child to a specific place to learn Swahili. You can actually teach them Swahili from home, and there's a lot of
there's
books,
resources,
tutorials, even whether it's YouTube, whether it's actually books that are written, and not only in Swahili. I mean, I found that out recently, where there's this lady, she's Nigerian, but she has a series of books that she has written in a lot. Basically, it's African languages: Hausa, Igbo, Swahili, Eritrean, Yoruba, all sorts of different. And she wants to add more. And so these resources are there. Sometimes parents just have to take themselves just a little bit of a step, and it's right there. Even the community colleges are now offering Swahili. So
and I think by Eritrean you mean Tigrinya.
If that's what it is, but but all I'm trying to say is that they're there. There's a lot of resources.
Okay, good. Uno Mike,
yes, sir.
Let's come to you. What are some assumptions that you made about second gen Kenyans, and you realize that you were just wrong at a certain point. And also to the people who are tuned in, give us certain things. Some of you have kids, some of you have family members who are younger. What are some assumptions that you made about them that you turned out to be wrong? And here, Kiza Soze is reminding us that they're teaching Swahili in Colombia now. I think that was in response to my comment about the Colombian soccer team. So that's very good, yeah. And they also have a black female vice president.
Yes,
so
they
that's
do.
also very interesting. But Mike, back to you. Like you have nephews, nieces. You guys have a clan here. Yeah, you have a whole clan.
I think
a whole lot of gofus.
Yeah.
I think my assumption had always been that, they are Kenyan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just by the virtue of your Kenyan parents, you're Kenyan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And by being Kenyan, then, language, you're thinking everything has to be, it's like Kenyan, So for me, it was automatic, kama kuna nyama choma,
Yeah.
wanachoma. Kama ni kukanda chapo, mademu watasaidia, wanaume,
The traditional roles.
The traditional roles, right? And it dawned on me when, like Omosh was saying, how I found it odd where we, in order for the kids not to understand what we are saying,
We would speak.
tunaongea kama ni Ogekoyo unaongea Gekoyo, kama ni Mujaka unaongea Kijaka. And that troubled me for some while, because I'm like, if we really want them, if they're really Kenyan, we should be putting the effort
To teach them.
And encourage.
And encourage.
Yeah.
And I've given examples of this. I'm coming from Jobo. I'm taking the red line. Nadondoka Silver Spring. There's some kids, probably teenagers, I'm going to say, just walking. Maze, it's like, yo, what? Then it's like one receives a call and there's a code switch. And they are speaking that, is it Amharic or whatever?
Tigrinya. Yeah.
Wanaongea wanakoroga, kukoroga kabisa. And I'm like, maybe we need to start teaching. Like,
yes.
So like now for me, I do recall a friend of mine, his kids, before they relocated to Kenya, his kids, when they entered the house, it was strictly Kikuyu, Kiswahili.
Okay.
There was no English.
That's very good.
Strictly.
Yeah.
And
the kids grew up knowing that.
Yes. And we're not talking about 15, 16. We're talking about 3, 4, 5. Now, when speech now becomes part of their, and it's not that they just started that at 8.
Mm-hmm.
If him and his wife, they would speak. So it was a mission that the parents, that they decided that they'll be speaking Kikuyu, such that even the kids themselves, they grow up learning that.
Okay.
Right? They'd have videos and music videos, Kikuyu, teaching Kikuyu, how to count, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that for me was amazing. And we're talking about maybe 16 years ago, 15.
Okay.
So the kids by now already, I think hopefully they're
comfortable.
So those are some of the things that, like, I think the major one for me was, automatically thinking, just because they've been born of Kenyan parents, they're automatically Kenyan.
Yes.
But shock on me.
Yes.
Shock on me.
The kids will tell you. They'll
Yeah.
tell you themselves in 6.8 seconds, I'm American.
Yeah.
And you're over there trying to have a whole argument with them about the way they're Kenyan. They're like, and you're like, your father is Kenyan, so you're from Kenya. That's how we do.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm American.
Yeah, and you see, those are interesting things. We are seeing identity issues coming up, language issues coming up. But interestingly, for me, like I did have a lot of assumptions, but one of the biggest ones, came last week when I was talking to Annette about the show. And Annette, you mentioned to me that when we came here as adults, we were leaders because we were the majority at that time. So we were already leaders in our 20s. Mm-hmm. We were already leaders in our 20s, and we were taking control of stuff. Ikiwa kama ni mambo ya mazishi, if it's events we're organizing, if it's ATL, if it's Dallas, we were in control of everything in our 20s. But what's happening right now within the Kenyan community, it's kind of like we grew with that leadership and did not like relinquish it to the younger generation. So now you have this new generation that are in their 20s, but like everything that's Kenyan related, it's still kind of led by people who are first generation Kenyans.
That's very true.
And when you look at even a lot of different committees, be it like funeral committees, or be it committees, or be it organizations, like that work to get Kenyans when you look at the lineup, there's this group that's consistently missing in action, and that's something that I had never paid attention to. It had never come to my mind. We talked about the baton not being passed.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that and your experience with this.
Yes, I think one of the things that really, really triggers me personally is the term youth, because it's used very ambiguously. And for the first generation that were here when they were in their 20s, and they were in their 20s in the 90s, and they're now, and they're nearing retirement age or retired, they use that word as a blanket term for anyone who is younger than them. And that's very problematic, because youth is supposed to specifically signify a certain group. Typically in the American culture, it's, with teenagers, and then maybe up until you graduate college.
In Kenya, it's up to 36.
That's a very interesting.
Yes.
That is,
when they talk about youth fund, it's up to 36.
So for the record, anyone who's listening, I am still a youth according to that standard.
Who is a youth? Say it again, Annette.
Until 36.
That's the Kenyan standard. But what did you say? What's a youth in America?
According to Kenyan standards, I have not reached. But according to American standards, we're talking about teenagers, and we're talking about up until. I have not passed, sir.
According to American standards, you passed.
According to American standards, yeah, I've passed. And so now the problem now becomes is the language that we use dictates how we behave. If we believe these people are youths, meaning that they're young and therefore are incapable in certain ways, and or they lack information or knowledge in certain ways, and they cannot contribute in a way that is significant. And that actually is not true. What I have experienced in the times where there have been committees for people who, now unfortunately my peers are also passing, okay, people in their 20s and their 30s, we're having that experience now. Our community is large enough that it's happening frequently enough, right? It's healthcare issues, it can be mental health issues, it can be accidents, it could be whatever the case may be, right? So in the times where I've had a peer of mine, a friend of mine who's passed, their parents and their friends have taken over the entire that entire process, which one, doesn't give us the opportunity to learn what the process is like, and two, doesn't give us an opportunity to grieve in a way that they were able to grieve when it was their turn when they were young adults, right? So they're robbing us of something that they had themselves. And another thing that is happening at the same time is our parents and the siblings of our parents. I just had an aunt that passed. That generation is also passing, and so we're not engaged in that process. We're not consulted when it comes to what we can do. I was never asked, for example, for like what tribute do you want to give? Those are things that people my age typically offer and kind of hope or force the issue about it being included in any type of formal funeral or memorial service when it comes into these things. The problem though is, for example, when someone lost their spouse back in the 90s, the spouse was the primary person involved in that scenario. We live in a time whereby maybe marriage is not as common, but we have, I guess, what we would call common law, although in the state of Maryland that's not a thing, but common law marriages, people who have lived with their partner for 6-7 years, and now the partner has passed and the family has decided they're going to exclude what I would consider personally a spouse, a significant other, from the process, because now that's a youth and they haven't done whatever cultural things. And so there's so many layers to that And what happens ultimately in these specific situations is that hurt is created because we're not communicating. And many of these things can be solved if we were actually talking to one another. Now, my generation was told that we're not supposed to speak until we were spoken to. We've also been told that we don't know anything and we're young and naive.
Now, who's telling you this? Is
Our
it
parents, our
or
aunts,
okay?
the you know, and some of us were lucky enough to have parents who said, you know, your opinion matters and all that. So they had something that countered it, but the vast majority of the society is telling us the negative thing, whereby it's just easier to be like, okay, this is your thing. We don't need to be there. I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to fight with Akina Pastor so and so because of this thing, you know.
Okay.
And so there's a disconnect that has been created that I want us to start a conversation so that we can fix it. It's not going to be fixed specifically today, now, but let's start having conversations about how we can repair these things, and let's do it in a way that's safe for everyone, for our parents, for me, for my parents, and also for myself and my peers.
Okay. Now that's wow. You know, like I don't even know what to say. Pablo is asking, for me, the assumption that these kids would be so reliant on parents like us growing up. These kids are learning things at a very young age and are turning out to be independent so fast. And just to add on to Ali's point, we tend to leave the young ones out of places that we should be passing leadership and the baton onto them. And this is, you know, like also another very salient point here where the baton is kind of not being passed, or maybe there's a lack of you know, like what you told me, you know, like in a conversation we had some time back, there's a lack of a collaborative way in doing things, in organizing events, in interacting with the community. You know, like a lot of these Kenyan organizations that we've interviewed and that have come up here, you know, like when you look at their boards and the people who are in the leadership, there's rarely any representation of, you know, like this generation that was raised in the US. And I think this is something that we need to be a little bit louder about and a bit more aggressive on it,
Yes.
so that that can start happening early. And to me, one piece of advice that I would actually give, you know, like this American born and raised generation is to not how do I put it, is to not wait for their turn, because we live in an age where the gatekeepers are gone. You have to take that baton. If it's not being given to you, you have to take it. And the reason I say this is because I personally remember when we were coming, for us it was something slightly different. The difference that was there when we were coming is that there was this other generation of Kenyans that had been here, that left Kenya at a time when Moi was still president. There was not much patriotism, you know, so issues like even speaking Kiswahili was kind of taboo. You know, people would look at you like, who are these guys? And why are they talking Kiswahili? We're listening to Kenyan music. We're wearing Kenyan t-shirts. We're wearing, you know, like these Kenyan bracelets. So we're coming with a different flavor, a different color, and a different kind of aggression that at the time the people didn't like, you know, because the DJs at the time were like, and almost, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because, you know, like you were there and you saw this transition happen. The DJs would be like, the Kenyan music used to be soul or reggae or lingala. That's what was Kenyan
Rock.
music. Yeah, and sometimes rock. But now we were here coming with this new, you know, like this new kapuka music, you know,
Genge.
Issa, Nameless. So now, you know, there were certain people who are looking at it, because, you know, like there was this classist thing of where if you speak Swa, you're kind of ghetto and everything. So these changes were happening, and we were taking it in such an aggressive way that there was tension. Like, who do these guys think they are, and what do they know about being in the US? Omosh, maybe you can give us, you know, like maybe what you saw during that transition.
It was interesting. You know, I've been here for a while, and when I first got to the US, like you're saying, the music that we listened to, we would listen to, I guess what we termed old school / soul. Then there was the rap, you know, like
Hip hop.
the hip hop, kind of Black Sheep, kind of Biggie, and you're going back a little bit, Big Daddy Kane, those type of guys, kind of Fresh Prince, LL Cool J, that type of music.
Rakim.
Yep, Eric B and Rakim, and then you also have reggae, which is pretty much has always been, and then there was a lot of soca going on back then. We listened to a lot of soca back then, along with reggae. But there was no Kenyan stuff. If there was Kenyan stuff, maybe the most was something like Chakacha.
Okay.
And but then you're not listening. You didn't hear people listening to, say, traditional Luo music. Now like everybody's listening. You would listen to Ohangla.
Yes.
Mogithi wasn't something that people were listening to, and if it was maybe like in the house, but not in the club.
Okay.
It's not something that was being thrown down in the club. Then there was this revelation, or should I say, revolution. I'm sorry, where there was Kenyan music that hit the scene. Wakamba Wawili. Who else was
Darling
around that
P.
time? Kinan Darling P.
Yeah.
Don't forget Hardstone.
Uhiki. That time. And it was a lot. There was that type of music that was coming in, and then it just started flooding us. And the way that you would get the music, because it's not like it was on YouTube. So unless somebody goes to Kenya, that's the only way, and brings
a tape or a
then,
DVD.
No, it was CD.
Yeah.
It was CD then, and it was CD that had MP3s.
Okay.
And then there were bootleg.
Okay.
Which means that they were not being sold by the person who actually did the music. And this is before they started coming down on, on bootlegging.
Yeah.
And so, you would go home, you get like about 4, 5, 6 CDs and MP3s, on one CD, you probably have like about like 60 to 80 of them or even more, and so you had a stack of music,
Okay.
but someone had to physically go home to get it. There was no Dropbox, I don't know, things being
There was
emailed.
no digital sharing.
None of that stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff didn't
No
happen.
LimeWire. I'm the era of LimeWire.
And LimeWire was coming in, but even on LimeWire, you were not downloading Kenyan music because somebody
They were
had
doing
it. That means that
mainstream.
someone had to upload it because remember, internet speed was not that fast.
Yeah.
So someone would have to have
AOL.
someone would have to have
90-day free trial.
But here it was fine. It's in Kenya because you have to upload it.
Yeah.
So I mean, unless you're going to your job and uploading the music, and then then I'll use LimeWire to go and pull the stuff down, because that was the whole concept of LimeWire was that was what the old Dropbox, that was illegal, but those things, they were just not there. And over time, the generations of people coming would come with, they would know the music that was hot. Whether it's via phone call or they've been in it, it's dropped in Kenya and they were just in Kenya.
Now
so they come to you.
Kinali.
And I guess so. And then they're like, can you play, Nameless, or can you play so and so? Can you play? And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And and you have to be on top of your game, and that's how the music started, hitting. And when there was a point in time where at Kenyan parties, you could go all night without playing hip hop. It was all Kenyan music. That's how hot it was.
And it
then.
happens even now. I think it's important to just use this as a conduit to connection, right? So music is so powerful that it's intergenerational, especially now, where you have people, U.S. born, and they're listening to the music that predates their parents, and we're doing that also, even as in the diaspora. We're listening to music that predates our parents. They're like, oh, my parents used to play that for me. How do you know that song? What do you know about this? There's no
Yes.
African parents love that.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
YouTube exists. And even
Yeah.
if it's just a picture of what the album cover looked like, that's playing the album for an hour and a half, we have an ability to connect now with music from generations that goes beyond our own personal. And this is an opportunity to connect. So for me, my father, he was really big on playing Christian music. All of those people who woke up on Saturday mornings hearing Christian music and it was time to clean the house. I'm part of that generation. But he also played Earth, Wind, and Fire. So there's music that I connect with there, and then now this is how you can see even on mainstream that it's connecting to younger generations. I watched the Trolls movie, the first Trolls movie, and they have the song September, and they have a Justin Timberlake rendition of that song, right? And so now this is an opportunity to connect multiple generations. So there's an older generation who's taking their kids to see this movie. There's a younger generation who now has fallen in love with this song that actually is not from their generation, or you know.
Yeah.
And we can do that now within our African roots, right? So there are your specific cultural, whether it's a Luo song, a Kikuyu song, a Kamba song, or whatever. They're those things that exist. And I've gone to parties where it's like, okay, all of the songs are being played, you know,
Yes.
all of the hits
Yes.
are being
Yes.
played. And to an extent, it took me getting a little bit older to understand, like, now the distinctions between the different tribes and the tribal languages. I mean, they clearly have a different cadence and all of that stuff. But for me, it was presented at the same time.
Wow.
At the same time.
That is so powerful.
So I can go from a Kikuyu song to a Luo song
To a Luya
Kisi
song.
to a Kamba song, like in the same, you know,
in the same set.
in the
Yeah.
same exact stuff, and the way that it was flowing and all of that stuff, to me it was normal. It then was later on that I was able to realize, hey, there was a time when these groups of people did not connect the same way that you are able now to connect, you know, with all this. So I
Correct,
can
yeah.
go to a Kisi party and we can, you know, and I can go to
And Baramba.
you know like
Yeah.
and that's great. So now for the parents to the children, you know, it's not a matter of having a crash course on psychology or going back and feeling bad about everything, and that's not what this is about. Everyone does the best that they can with what they have.
Correct.
But at a certain point in time, you're out of that season and you can look back. And what we can do now is let's find our points of connection. Maybe for you, it's music. For some people, it's church. For some people, it's the outdoors.
Okay.
For some people, it's traveling.
Wow.
Like, let's find those points of connections and be intentional. I love that there's some wazes in my community in Baltimore who go and they've taught their young men how to go and slaughter the goat from the beginning to the end. They go to the farm in Pennsylvania.
Nyamachoma.
They go to the farm in Pennsylvania. This is not something you're getting from a store and you're going and you're picking that one. Like,
No.
it's already done. No. You're going there, you find it, you're picking it. You do the whole process until it's over.
And nothing goes to waste,
Nothing goes to waste.
including
Everyone-
matumbo.
And you see how the matumbo is even made.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, hats off to you guys. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful for me to see. It's so beautiful for me to see my peers and those who are younger than me going and having those experiences. That's what we're talking about. You guys are leading it. That's passing the baton. Let's keep that going.
Wow, you know, that right there is so powerful. You know, like, these are things we take for granted. You know, like with Chinjambuzi, you know, slaughtering a goat was
Yeah,
just
because it was part of
it
what
was
we
just
did.
a normal
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
It was
Every
part
day.
of
Yeah.
day-to-day life. You know, like for those of us like in the Muslim cultures, we would always slaughter a goat, you know, like during the two different Eids, you know, like during different occasions, we would slaughter goats and it would be in the backyard. You know, so it was normal, you know, and boys would always go there and do it. But we sometimes fail to realize that a kid growing up here, this is an experience that
No
they've-
connection.
Yeah, they have no connection to it.
None whatsoever.
They've never had, you know. So like when you go to a slaughterhouse and they tell you that they're trashing the matumbo, that's normal because people in America don't eat matumbo. When they tell you they're throwing away the
Tripe.
head,
We don't eat tripe.
yeah, when they're telling you, or when they go bleach the matumbo, which takes out all the good taste out of it and leaves it white like a gatauro. You know, it's you know, it's these are experiences that these kids have never had. So I think what I'm learning from this is that certain things that we take for granted can actually be that point which a young person connects, you know, like with their culture, and is what will make him want to know more about their culture. Quite a number of comments here, here coming.
Before the comments, I'll
yes.
just say,
Mhm.
try it and see what happens. If
Okay.
you're scared, just try it and see what happens. Let's
Okay.
see what the people have to
All
say.
right, Sambaza podcast, karibu sana. Sambaza says the upcoming generation will take over well. How they will do it is by observing what the older generation is doing. When you see these kids running around in functions, it doesn't mean that they're not paying attention. Y'all will be shocked what as first generation is to drag our kids to these activities or functions so they can interact with the other kids of their generation. All is not lost. So quite a positive comment there coming from Sambaza podcast. And then Pablo, I think in response to Sambaza says, but they should also be made to get involved in community activities. Assuming they are observing will not cut it, as per my opinion.
Agreed.
We need to teach them to barbecue, make mutura. It is not so much about dragging them, but providing them a way to interact with the community and learn our ways. Now, Afro-Jamaican here says, I'm a proud non-Kenyan Kenyan. As research I share with my kids, my youngest sometimes takes Swahili classes with me. So that's very good, Afro-Jamaican. We are so proud of you and so proud of your kids.
Next week?
Taking those Swahili classes. Yeah, next week, Afro-Jamaican is going to be, a Kenyan.
Are we sure? Because
Well,
part of the Kenyan nature sometimes is not to show up.
well,
Is he going to show up?
but he's a non-Kenyan.
He's a non-Kenyan.
He's a
who's not-
non-Kenyan.
Kenyan.
Who's not practicing his Kenyanness.
He's trying to get
He's a
Kenyan
non-Kenyan
citizenship.
Kenyan. Okay, sir.
He's trying to get Kenyan citizenship.
So he's not practicing his
I
Kenyanness
take
yet.
that back, Afro-Jamaican. Karibu sana kadhe.
Okay, and then, but Jamaicans, Pia, they also have that taboo of being late. But maybe Afro-Jamaican will tell us. Afro-Jamaican will tell us.
We shall see. We shall see.
Okay, and then Pablo anasema nilijua tu huyu DJ Omosh ni yule wa mixes za 10 in 1 kwa CD moja. I don't know exactly what that means, but Sambaza podcast says,
Leave him alone.
when I have conversations on the podcast with the younger generation, they are aware of their current traditions. They are being developed with the first generation. Examples are like Richard Busaka, Kenya, Zulfikar Manzi, Tanzania, who certainly are aware of their place in the future of African culture in the next
Who are
generation.
those?
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
So Sambaza will
have
tell us who
follow-up
those are.
questions, but okay.
Yeah. So we'll just keep them. We're
I'll
gonna
sit
come to
tight.
them shortly. And then let me see. It says it's in these functions. The older kids will hang around asking the older folk how to cook mutura, and they will be taught. We just
Right.
aren't seeing it all the time. And by the way, it's not only mutura. Kuna pia biryani.
Okay.
Kuna samaki wa kupaka.
Right.
Kuna vitumbua, kuna mahamri. There's also other foods too
Right,
beyond
right.
mutura, which I think
Chapati.
which I think kids need to be exposed to, so
Shamashi.
that they'll also want to know how to prepare them. And then Afro-Jamaican again says, my kids have assignments around Jamaican Trinidadian cultures. They learn about Kenya and other African cultures. That's very
Excellent.
That's very good.
Excellent.
Yeah, Luis Muya, Grace Ndomo, karibu sana. And then Pablo says, Annette's passion for culture is evident. Hapa naona one mic should have a culture hour. Okay?
Now, before you go there,
Yeah.
speaking of culture, there's a question Pablo has asked over here.
Let me see. First of all, Gracie says, good stuff. Applaud you, lady. What question has Pablo asked?
Does Annette speak Swahili?
I love this
Kikuyu?
question.
No, she doesn't. She
I
just
I know.
she does not
No.
speak. She has a twang for a reason.
No.
Why would they ask?
What?
No,
She has a
let,
twang for a
let,
reason.
let
First
her
off,
You're triggering her now.
let her answer the question.
Thank you.
Don't answer on
Ali,
herself.
thank you for
Yeah.
Sorry, Basi.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Those are the assumptions that you made, and those nephews of yours knew what you were saying about them. So don't bring them to the studio.
Pero choni
Annette,
matek ma flying kick.
na
ma
mangum na flying kick.
I think we need to understand what language means. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you want me to write an essay in Swahili, it's not going to happen. But let me tell you something. Kikuyus, Kenyans, sorry. Oh, sorry, I said it the right way the first time. Many of you cannot write an essay in Swahili properly. Okay, so let's think about these standards correctly.
Mm-hmm.
The point of language in this conversation is about being able to be conversational. And I have the ability to be conversational, but I have been taught that if my accent isn't correct, if it doesn't land in the right way, if my cadence isn't correct, that I'm going to be insulted, I'm going to be laughed at, and all of those things. So yes, my default answer is no, I don't speak Swahili. However, my Swahili speaking people who are outside of the Kenyan demographic have heard me speak more Swahili than my Kenyans have. I have friends who are from West Africa who maybe went to school in Kenya for one reason or another. They've heard me speak Swahili. I have friends who are from Tanzania who teach me that the Swahili that I learned was not even good Swahili because, whatever.
Yeah,
So
it's
there's that,
So,
right?
so let me add on something to that. And here I'm coming, like also as a Swahili teacher. There's certain things that I see, like from the older generation that make my blood boil.
Higher.
Okay, tell us.
Okay.
Number one, like when a young person is making effort to speak Swahili,
Yeah.
don't overcorrect. Number one. And even when you're correcting, correct it from a good place. Don't correct while laughing at them.
And let me just add to that. Let's correct the same way we would a toddler who's never spoken the language before, because that is exactly the same place you're in, even
Yes.
if you are 10,
Yes.
20,
Correct.
30.
So
You
so
don't laugh at that person.
Yeah, it's not your default
How
setting.
dare you
Yeah.
laugh at a child who's fallen when they're trying to walk?
It's not, yeah. It's not your
exactly. So
default setting.
and this is something that commonly I see, like when the younger generation or that first generation is making an attempt to speak, there's that laughter. How did you say that? Now, what this does, and then you get surprised that your child does not understand the language that is being spoken in the house.
And has no interest.
What this technically does in their psyche, it makes them shut down. Like all you're gonna do is laugh at me all the time. It makes them shut down. So this is something that we need to stop. The second thing, people who learn Swahili, as in people who learn Swahili like as maybe as grown-ups or even as teens, having been raised here in the English language, they are not gonna sound the way you sound. And I believe this is the same for all other languages that you're gonna teach your kids. They're not gonna sound the way you sound. This their mother tongue, whether we like it or not, is English. Because you chose to speak to them in English as kids. So their mother tongue, like whether you like it or not, is English. So they're gonna have, there's that new Swahili accent that's now coming up with people who were born here, and let's get comfortable with it. There's this young girl, I think she's like 20, 21 years old, called Kekimbili on Instagram. She does an amazing job. She speaks Swahili. She's been learning Swahili, and she speaks with that English accent, but you can understand her. So let's be very comfortable with this. Because here's the thing. Most of you who are raised in Nairobi and learned your mother tongue, like while you're in Nairobi, you don't sound you don't sound like your grandparents,
Bro.
When you speak Kikuyu, or Kijaluo,
Correction.
you don't.
If you can even speak.
Right.
There you go.
That's another one.
There you go.
Right.
Personally, I'll
This
tell
guy,
you.
ask him
Yeah.
if he spoke the language before he came to
No,
this country.
I started speaking Kikuyu when I got here.
So that's why I'm saying let's have some grace, because I usually see this a lot, like happening. And some of these people who are laughing, if we sit here to engage in a Kiswahili conversation for half an hour, they themselves will be sweating. But
Right.
they're happy to laugh at a young person who's going out of their way to try to learn the language.
Let's talk about linguistics and how this
Yeah.
works, right? Because the truth of the matter is, for example, when it comes to accents specifically, have you ever talked to a toddler in English in America? They don't make sense.
Yeah.
They never have.
They don't say their words proper. Now they are
Yeah, their
talking to you
tongue,
with
yes.
the confidence because they're learning, and we have given them that grace. They talk to you with the confidence as if what they're saying is clear. What happens is in the home, you learn vocabulary. You learn how to say table, how to say cup, how to say this, that, and you learn vocabulary. Once you leave the home and you realize only the people in my home understand me. This is a child we're talking about, right? 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, you go to school. That's when you realize the way that I'm saying these words, they don't understand me. And guess what? I want to have friends. So you start listening differently. You're like, okay, it's not just acceptable to know the vocabulary. It's important for me to understand the accent and to do the nuance and the cadence and all of the things that go into language. That's how a child learns a language. So there is the at-home part. Let's do our at-home part better. Give vocabulary, okay? Let's stop insulting people's accents. Let's stop talking about their cadence and give them the vocabulary and allow them then now to go into these social situations where they have peers. It's important that it's peers who are speaking the language, maybe Kenyans who have come more recently, right? That's when they're going to learn the accent.
That's very powerful.
That's when they're going to learn the nuance and the cadence and the things. You do not need to correct a child. They will correct if the environment allows them the opportunity to learn.
Yes.
Okay.
Gives them the opportunity to make the mistakes.
They make the mistakes and then they realize, hiya, the way that I said that thing, that person didn't understand what I was saying. They were confused. You can see the confusion on their face, right? Now, when you're a child, you're so busy trying to figure out how to communicate with each other that the learning is co-optive. When you have an age difference, or if you have someone who speaks a language you know but another language that you don't know, there is a tendency to do what it is that you're talking about, which is laughing at that person or whatever. And that is something. Well, I really learned this truly from the deaf community when I was learning sign language. I've never been laughed at by a deaf person. They're so excited to see that someone is attempting
to understand,
to
communicate with them and learn
in
how
their
to,
language.
Yes.
I have never ever, I'm telling you, not even a snicker. I can say the most foolish thing in sign language and they'll be like, oh, did you mean this? And they'll sign it out in with letters, and I'll say yes, and they will teach me every single time. When I used to work in retail, every single time. I've never been laughed at a deaf person. I am more confident in sign language than some of these languages where people have laughed at me.
Okay, so I think parents, like the ones who are now scratching your heads as to why your kids are not speaking the language, you're probably part of the fault. You're probably part of the reason why they don't is because they shut down. Like when you keep making fun of them and when you keep laughing at them, they'll just go out. Another comment here coming from Sambaza. He says, those people I mentioned were on the podcast and shared snippets of how they interacted with their parents and community. They came onto the podcast. You'll have to check it out. But also, there was a young singer who was at your show and talked about the way older Kenyans say they're living out at a function, but 3 hours later they haven't left. That was a powerful message as she observed a trait. So like I said, it's okay, but we have to be more inclusive to help the younger community. That was Audrey. Like she was here. I think she was 16 years old. Or when she was here, So these are very interesting.
Comment. I think that let me just give you guys a tool. When you guys were growing up in Kenya, you had, even if it was different, I prefer the word nationalities, but different tribes within your complex, wherever it was that you're living, you had some consistency within the culture. And here we're trying to balance a whole bunch of different things at the same time. And so the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to be an ally for your children and to help them navigate that. You might not know the American culture, and that's fine. You can't know what you don't know. What you don't know, you don't know, right? But what you do know is the culture that you come from, and you can help be an ally in that position, in that respect. But some of these nuanced things, you have to be very intentional, okay? There's some dads, for example, if you have a 2-parent household and the dad says, we're going to be leaving in 10 minutes, and 10 minutes, and 30 minutes later, an hour later, 3 hours later, whatever, maybe it's your time, auntie, maybe it's your time, mom, to say, hey, just when you see your father put on his shoes,
that's when you move.
That's when,
it's serious. Okay?
Just like that.
When he puts on his shoes, I need you to come so quickly. Okay? Because if you don't come quickly, he's going to be like, I have been telling you.
Yeah.
Right? But these are some nuanced things that some of us learned crash course.
Yeah.
You've learned crash course, but somebody be intentional. Let's be intentional. Let's try and look out for the points where there's a gap.
Yeah.
And be able to fill the gap. Those of us who can do it. Maybe it might not be the parent direct. It might be the auntie. might be, you know, whatever that
Yeah.
village is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that for our people.
Yeah, and then Pablo here is saying, Ali speaking na ukali like a mwalimu mkuu. Sawa mwalimu tutati. Okay. I mean, I just think this needs to go out there because I think sometimes, you know, like parents do it for comic relief, but they don't understand
Nah,
that
it's psychological
they don't
damage.
understand it's psychological for the kid, and they're gonna shut down from that. And then Gracie Ndomo Gishane says, my kids are learning Swahili, and I hold myself from laughing and encourage them to keep going. That's very good, Gracie.
Very good.
My 7-year-old son asked me for a kifuniko, and it took me a minute to know what he was asking for. And I love that Gracie is acknowledging that, because sometimes when people are laughing, they themselves, you know, like have also maybe been in situations where they've not spoken Swahili for a long time. So that trigger in your brain that remembers, it kind of becomes lazy, you know, and that happens, you know, if you stop using a language. And then Pablo here, Sambaza podcast says, I'm guilty of overcorrecting my wife, and she is still living pole pole. I allow them to speak Swahili English. My mom was stunned with my Swahili accent changing and always told me don't bring the Nairobi accent back to Mombasa. Ali, our laughing as African is a nuance to our way of interaction. We don't know how to express it. I get it. In USA, it's not. So we have to adapt and not laugh when people speak Swahili. I'm a guilty party, you know, and you know, and here's an interesting thing.
I've laughed at I've laughed sometimes at the way my nephew might speak Kikuyu, or how he pronounces. He may pronounce some words.
Yeah.
But what I do is I try to correct.
Okay. So, but now you know not to do it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I'm like, I'm being
Blind spot alert.
like a nonsense.
Yes.
The vehicle approaching does not whatever seem closer, but it's right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, Annette's experiences are kind of similar to what a lot of us experienced, you know, like with parents who were not raised in Nairobi, but now with some of us now being born in Nairobi, you know, like there was that dynamic. And I think, and I dare say, you know, like that gap, you know, like especially for people who came from certain parts of Kenya, was so huge. I would say it was bigger than the gap of moving from Kenya to the US. That move from, you know,
steep.
like a certain remote part of Kenya to Nairobi, it's a very, very steep curve. So I think, you know, like there's some similarities in these dynamics that we're seeing. And I want to remind the listeners that you're tuned in to the One Mic Show. And I'm your host and producer, Ali Badawi. Our guest tonight is U.S. political and cultural contributor Annette Karanja. She's here talking about the disconnect between second-gen American Born Kenyans with their older first-gen counterparts. Now, Annette will officially be the voice of the second-geners on the One Mic Show moving forward. She'll also be a contributor in American politics as we approach primary season for elections 2024. So stay tuned, and we'll be shortly asking if old parenting styles are doing more harm than good to the American-born generation. But before we continue, I think we're going to take our quick sports break. But before, as our sports intern is getting ready, I think, you know, like this issue of parenting, which we're not going to be talking about now, it's going to be after the sports segment, but maybe just to give a hint of what we might be talking about. What are your thoughts about, and of course all parents have different parenting styles, but what's a general blind spot you see when it comes to parenting now that you're an adult?
Context.
Okay.
Context is everything. Okay. So there are some things that made sense in the context in which some of us grew up in. Those of
Okay.
us who grew up in Kenya have a different context than those who grew up here.
Okay.
And if we approach things from a perspective of context, it can kind of take away some of the issues that we have. So for example, when you go say, you know, I used to go walk 5 kilometers so that I can get
Without
some
shoes.
water, without shoes, to get water. And then if you trip and you spill the water, you got to go back another 5 kilometers and all that stuff so that you can get these pails of water and all that. Now, when I'm living in the United States and there's a tap that brings me water, What does that mean?
Well, does it have any sense or
Also, the United States has decided that the metric unit is not something that they're going to use. So, do I even understand what these kilometers mean?
yes,
Context.
context?
Did you take the time to just go on your phone real quick and just even translate what 5 kilometers means so that your child who knows miles
Yeah.
can say, I walked this many miles so that I could get water, and then, XYZ. There's context, and there are little things that you can do to provide context for your children so that you can actually get conversation. A lot of us are talking, but many of us are not communicating.
Okay, so those small details, I mean, because these seem like very minute details, even now just listening, kilometers and miles. These minute details, they actually do matter.
They matter.
Wow.
They matter because if you don't understand what 75 degrees Fahrenheit means,
Yeah.
and you're working in Celsius, my God, what type of temperatures are these?
So you're telling your kid I was walking in 45 degrees heat. Yeah, and the kid is thinking, oh wow, that's some really nice weather.
Right,
like,
like
to be walking.
Right. Yeah. So we need to understand context, and we need to do it intentionally because guess what, grown-ups, you are the grown-ups. So you can say you're the grown-ups, and so therefore you lay down the law, but you're also the grown-ups, and therefore you are the ones who have to bridge the gap.
Okay. All right. So now we wanna, like take a slight shift, and get into our sports segment. Uno Mike, back to you.
Party people. This is where I think I play the IQ, eh?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it is right here.
Oh.
It's right here. Hold on.
Sports and more sports in the One Mic Show.
All right. Sports anchor, welcome. Talk to us. Yeah, and then again, remind again the listeners your name, how old you are, and what you're going to be talking about tonight.
Yes, so my name is Naiman Ruta. I'm 17 years old, and I'll be talking about soccer.
Okay, all right, let's go.
All right, so the 2022 Women's World Cup. So for the first time ever in the FIFA Women's World Cup, 3 African teams qualified for the knockout stage.
Okay.
Nigeria, Morocco, and South Africa.
What about Jamaica?
Jamaica, we're
the
talking
Caribbean.
about
Okay,
Africa.
it's
Yeah,
debatable.
yeah, debatable, but they did qualify. Yeah, true,
Okay,
true.
all right.
Yeah, so Morocco are looking like the strongest team right now. They had the best record in comparing to the 3 teams.
Okay,
And Morocco had the best record with 2-0-1, so 2 wins, 0 draws, and 1 loss.
okay, and they beat Colombia.
They did beat Colombia, and they actually upset Germany because Germany, they finished 3rd in the group.
Wow.
They finished 3rd in the group. Number 2, Germany.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's unbelievable stuff, yeah. And as big as, because also Nigeria, they upset Canada as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the Morocco story, man, is wow.
Yeah,
It's-
that's
it's
amazing.
incredible.
And with the Morocco story, like I have to point out, like there's this one lady who was wearing a hijab.
Yeah.
And this also, like just like not to take away from the soccer story, I think it's important for people to understand because when people saw her picture,
Context.
there was confusion, so some people were saying, oh my goodness, she's being oppressed. Why is she being forced to wear this? And like we're like the team is actually not wearing hijabs. Yes, they're a Muslim country, they're not wearing hijabs. She has come out and said, I want to wear a hijab, and they gave her the opportunity to do that. I did see some forums where people were even starting to make comparisons with Afghanistan, and that's when I started realizing that social media sometimes is not the best place to go.
No,
And
it's
they're
when you're
not.
looking
they're
for
also
information.
culturally out of touch, and I would have to applaud Nike. I'm not really big on shouting out specific companies, but Nike has a whole collection for hijabs, sports specific, which is important for those of you who don't know. The type of material for hijabs are typically cotton materials. They're not necessarily the most comfortable, so you wouldn't necessarily wear a cotton shirt if you can wear like an Under Armour shirt that's going to be breathable and the sweat part of all of that. Nike was one of the first ones, and they did that with part of their women's launch on products, athletic attire, to have the hijab, and that's something that we're seeing more mainstream. I think
Okay.
we're going to see more of it.
Yes. All right. Back to you, Naaman.
All right, so the U.S. women's national team finished 2nd in their group. For the first time in 12 years, they finished 2nd in their group, and it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable because it's been 12 years. It's been 12 years since the last
Okay.
Women's World Cup in 2011. So
So are they?
there's the three World
do you
Cups.
feel like they're on their way out?
I don't think they're winning this World Cup because the expectation, because they're the number one ranked team, but I don't think they're winning this.
Do you think at least they'll proceed beyond the round of 16? Who are they playing in the round of 16?
I'm pretty sure they're playing.
Is it no, I wanted to say Sweden, but I'm not sure. You know, we can
South
check.
Africa, maybe, I think.
We can check to see. Yeah, maybe.
Playing Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden.
Sweden.
Sweden
Yeah.
is the one they're playing in the round of 16.
I think Sweden are winning.
Yeah, so that's gonna be tough competition.
Yeah.
You know, it's gonna be tough competition. I mean, I'm still putting my money on the U.S., but like you said, it's gonna be very difficult for them
Yeah.
to win this World Cup.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And another thing is that we're definitely seeing the inexperience from this team because throughout this group stage, they've only won one game, 2-0 record. So 1 win, 2 draws. The draw first against Netherlands and then the draw against Portugal.
Yeah.
And they had 17 shots that game compared to 6. So we saw them attacking, and we didn't see the result.
But not finishing.
Not
Lack of
finishing.
position.
Not
Yeah.
finishing, exactly. So
Okay.
it's
And I think in one game the goalpost was their friend. Was America's friend.
Which game?
Netherlands.
Oh,
I think,
against the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Because they were
Okay.
chapa in that goalpost. The goalpost.
Yeah.
I think it was MVP.
yeah, yeah. It's really there's real like inexperience in this team, and what the players need to understand is to play their roles, and that also comes to the coach who also doesn't have inexperience as well. He has no experience, and he's actually a new coach, Vlatko Andonovski.
Okay.
Vlatko Andonovski, yeah,
Yeah.
he was recently hired, and Jill Scott was the coach before that, and she was the one that led them to back to
One of the most winningest
exactly, yeah,
coaches.
yeah.
And why did they let her go?
They let her go because she retired. She
Oh,
backed
she
down.
retired.
She backed
Okay.
down. Yeah, she backed down.
But there was
Yeah.
a lot of stuff going on
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
behind the scenes. So.
Okay. All right.
Now, can you guys talk about how the African team upset Brazil by tying them 0-0, which I think was a win for Jamaica.
Oh, you're talking about Jamaica.
Jamaica,
Yes.
Brazil.
Yeah.
Wow,
It was a tied game.
I saw Brazil in the first game against Haiti. They won 5-0. But then after that, I mean, wow, they lost against France, and then they tied against Jamaica. And Jamaica, they're a solid team as well.
Because I think a sleeper team. I think Jamaica is a sleeper
yeah.
team because having watched, because I rewatched the Jamaica Brazil game. Man, Brazil was really pressing, but their goalie was phenomenal. Jamaica, their defense was exceptional, but also Jamaica are not just being caught flat-footed because they were also making runs. They were also attacking. You know, like they would get a chance, then they counter.
Yeah.
So they know how to
So
play against big teams. 'Cause
Yes.
also the France game as well is a really good game.
yes,
It was a really good game.
it was.
Yeah.
It's only that this time the time difference 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. and then you have to wake up to go watch. You have to go and wake up and ngangana with the routers and carrier and servers like Omosh. But it would some, and I think now, especially for the round of 16,
Yeah.
it is one of those you're like, okay, maybe you can spare until 1 o'clock to watch a game.
So now
Because-
there's no clear favorite. Is there like any particular clear favorite?
There's
No,
no
man.
clear.
I don't think it's a clear
This is an
favorite.
interesting World Cup. There's no clear favorite, and usually the clear favorite is the U.S. The U.S. They're always number one ranked in the World Cup, and then there's always like Germany and Sweden. But Germany, they got upset, and Sweden, I mean, they're going up against the
What
U.S.
happened to Japan?
Yeah, Japan.
'Cause
What
they
about
used-
Japan?
U.S. and Japan was a thing. for
Japan
the
are
last
in the-
couple-
No, Japan have been playing well.
the
They have been
last-
playing well. They have been playing well.
They
but
are in the next round of 16, and they're facing Norway.
But are they also categorized? Could we categorize them as favorites, or that would be a stretch?
To be honest, no, I wouldn't say,
I can't say
because
yeah.
so far I think the US is the one. US, Germany, Brazil have always been the teams that are
The teams to
favorites.
beat. Yeah.
Those are the teams to supposedly win. Like even the last World Cup, Brazil was highly favored. It was going to be actually between Brazil, the US, depending on how, and France at one point in time. So it's hard to say in this right now with the teams that are there.
Yeah.
Any team can do anything.
Wow.
And the reason why I
would
brought
say,
up
Go ahead.
And the reason why I brought up U.S. and Sweden is because they're two favorites. They're two favorites, and they're going up against each other already in the round of 16. For me, that's what I expect as like a semifinal or quarterfinal type of game. But you're seeing those two teams already facing against each other in the round of 16. So you're gonna see two big teams go out. So this is really for anybody. It's really for anybody.
Okay. So out of the 3 African countries, let's also throw in Jamaica, like in there for argument's sake.
Insisting.
Out of those 4 African countries, if you were to pick one to make it to the finals, which one would it be?
Morocco.
Okay.
Because we saw, even in the men's World Cup a few months back, they surprised the world. They shocked the world, and they went to the semifinals. I actually thought they were going to go to the finals, but France and Mbappe, they were too good at the time. But yeah, I see Morocco, because it's the men's and women. Now that I can see the spirit in them, and I definitely see them, fighting for that final place. But
now here's
they can definitely go far.
Wait a minute. Mubelo is asking about here. Don't forget China. In what context?
As a favorite.
As a favorite.
China.
Where,
Have they ever?
Favorite in what context?
they-
Maybe in Beijing.
No, the women's team has been, like there were years when they were actually very good. So I haven't seen China play in this
But if you
particular
bring
World Cup.
China up before you bring Japan up, that's because Japan has done successfully more recently.
To me, Japan on paper is more of a favorite
I agree.
than China
As far
is.
as records.
Yeah. Than China, and even just based on, with soccer, sometimes you just go by the way you see them play, not even by records, because this record sometimes is what gets people shocked.
And I think it's an American thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to records.
Yeah, they
it's all
love
about
records.
records. Or these guys have a certain, they have this type of percentage win against this team for however long or whatever.
Yeah, they'll unleash some serious stats, and then their team loses.
When the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
Vindu vichange anka.
Yes. So that's
Things change.
Yeah.
So it's not always about records, because on that day, like I always tell my daughter, when the soccer gods decide, they are with you.
Yes.
They are with you.
They are with you.
If the soccer gods decide we have abandoned ship,
Yeah.
that's it. Case in point, sometimes, hitting the crossbar, like whatever you do, there's some games when you start, even if whichever team is playing, and you can just see the chances over the bar, great save, this, that, the other. You're like,
and then there's another team that will get just 1 or 2 chances and they convert, and that's what wins the game.
and that is it.
Yes.
So I think, and especially, I don't know, you guys get a chance, watch Jamaica.
Okay.
There's a way Jamaica hustles and play, and especially the center forward. I can't her name, and I think she plays for Manchester City.
Man City.
Yes, she is like she is awesome.
Yes.
She is awesome.
Okay.
I'll get her name, but
I also love
Superb.
I also love the Nigerian team.
yes,
And I love, like their attitude, like with a lot of these African teams, the African teams that have performed the best are those teams that come with a happy attitude and unapologetic
Africa.
African
And
attitude.
passion.
South Africa.
yes.
South Africa was viral.
Yes.
When it came to their entrance,
Yeah.
the
So-
energy they have in the locker room.
So to me, I actually have South Africa in the finals. That's just maybe it's an emotional pick that I'm making, but I think I love the Nigerian team, but I'm looking at South Africa in the finals.
That's an interesting pick, because they had an interesting game against Argentina.
Yes, they did.
They did.
Yes, they did, and I think they learned their lesson.
Yeah.
Well, I
So-
hope, because the game.
Yes, they were winning that game. But I think that was a good point to learn the lesson.
Let's not take away
Yeah.
Argentina, their first goal. That lady struck that ball from the outside the 18.
Outside the box.
Yeah.
I don't even think Ramsdale would have flexed that one.
But the Argentinians,
What's
the
up, boy?
Argentinians are out too.
No, they're out.
finished
Then
last
they're
in the
out.
group. They finished last in the group.
They're out. Yeah, so
Terrible.
they're out.
I'm pretty
So
sure they
name,
had 1
do you
point,
have
yeah.
do you have a list of the 16, the knockout?
The round of 16s. I don't have the whole entire list, but you can definitely
Yeah.
look, yeah.
So you have Sweden versus Spain.
Sweden versus USA.
No, sorry, Switzerland versus Spain.
Uh-huh.
Netherlands versus South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and then in one group. So the other one you have Japan, Norway,
Mm-hmm.
Sweden, USA, and then on this other side you've got Australia, Denmark, France, Morocco. That's gonna be interesting.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
England, Nigeria.
England,
That
Nigeria.
that will be explosive.
England.
That will be explosive.
England
That's
are
another
top team.
team.
So
Yeah.
if Nigeria
England.
win that game, if Nigeria win that game, that's
Then Colombia
It would be quite an upset.
and jam
Jamaica.
down.
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wagwan,
Colombia
sister.
and Jamaica.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yama.
All right. Wow. That's interesting. I'll want to see all those 4 African teams advance into into the quarterfinals. That will be something. That will be exciting.
So yeah, so the USA Sweden game, it will be August 6th at 5 a.m.
Wait, 5 a.m.
5 a.m.
5 in the morning.
God damn.
On a Sunday, no less.
Yeah, but anyway, their times are interesting. 1 a.m., 4 a.m. But South Africa, Netherlands on Saturday, 10 p.m.
Oh, that's a good time.
That is
That's a
watchable.
great
Yeah.
time to watch.
That's
a
a
game.
good time.
Yes.
That's a great
Yeah.
time.
Then Nigeria, England is at 3:30 a.m.
A.M.
My God. France, Morocco, 7 a.m. Jesus is Lord. Okay, it's gonna be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And now, real quick, before we conclude the sports segment, I don't know whether there's anything that you wanted to add on to that, Neyman, but Annette, or something we were talking about the pay for the U.S. women's soccer.
Oh yeah, we were.
Yes,
earlier
so the
talking
U.S.
about that.
women's soccer team, they had a lawsuit because they were not being paid compared to their male soccer team. And the interesting thing is that the United States women's soccer is the more winningest team compared to their male counterparts. So when it comes to World Cups, the United States women's team usually does very well, and when it comes to international games, they do very well and they have been ranked very highly. However, their pay does not indicate that. So if you think about the American dream and some of the nuanced things that we are told, if you put your head down and work really hard, then you're going to, get compensated. The U.S. women's team was not experiencing that.
Okay.
And there are some other leagues where they've had this issue. For example, when it comes to the National Hockey League, for example, they have a men's team and a women's team. And they also were in the pursuit of a lawsuit, and the men's team actually kind of band together with them, and so that was resolved very quickly. But when it came to the U.S. soccer team, this has been in litigation for several years. Mind you, there's 4 years, between each of these world stage matches, and so it's not surprising that in 2022 they came to a settlement. And part of the settlement was not just the pay, which there was a certain amount, I think it was $24 million that was promised to the players, but there was also a promise to upkeep and make sure that there was an increase in wage for the women who played in the World Cup. The reason why this is significant at this point in time is because the focus on that litigation, I believe, has had an impact on their ability to perform, because this is now an added stress that other teams do not have, and that's something to take into account, right? So if you are in the middle of litigation, whatever your job may be, it might have an impact on your ability to perform. Not only that, we have the changing of the leadership there within the Women's World Cup, and we cannot say to what degree the litigation had an effect on this, but that is a factor. And when it comes to the leadership, that of course is going to take that's going to create an impact on how the team is able to perform, the cohesiveness. You want to have a continuation of leadership, and when it comes to coaching and things like that. I'm very hopeful for the team because the players are very strong players. That's without a doubt. And being compensated accordingly is also going to be very helpful. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in this current World Cup, but then also in the future, if they're being compensated at the level in which they are performing. I'm very curious to see what that does for the women who play for the World Cup, and also what type of talents that's going to bring to the team in the future.
And to add on what you're saying, so with the women's game and the men's game, the women's game, like in U.S. soccer, when it comes to U.S. soccer, the women's are known for, they're known to be the better team, and they're just the face of U.S. soccer. But something to take into consideration is that it's all about exposure. Because in TV, you see, it's all about the men's soccer and men's game. And it's the same thing with the NBA. You can look at the NBA and the WNBA. So it's everywhere. But the fact is that it's all about exposure. That's what it comes down to. It's all about the exposure.
So you think the women's teams, be it soccer or basketball, they're not getting enough exposure?
They're not getting enough, because you see an NBA game, it's advertised and all that, and with that WNBA, it barely gets advertised the same way. So it's
Or even sponsorships.
Exactly.
If you go down the cereal aisle, do you see NBA players or WNBA players?
No, that's true. That's
I mean, there are many things you can look at. Sponsorship. Look at even now, for example, how many knew that there's a women's soccer league? in the
Yeah,
US.
yeah, the US.
NWSL.
And
NWSL.
yeah, right? You know, not that many people know that.
Know about
Yeah.
it.
Right? So all you're seeing is you know there's MLS. You know Messi's here.
But do you think
Right.
do you think maybe there's fear out of like the sponsors that if we sink a lot of money in here, we might not get a return out of this investment? I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm just
I know in America,
yeah
it's the bottom line
yeah
is the dollar.
Okay.
That is it.
Okay,
Am
let's
I
talk
going
about
to
this.
make money?
Let us talk about this.
Yes.
Right now, we just had the biggest premiere, one of the most anticipated double premieres that happened in movie theaters, and it was
Oppenheimer
Barbie.
and Barbie.
the Barbie movie
Yeah.
and
Oppenheimer and
Oppenheimer.
Barbie.
Yeah.
Right? So, if we're going to have a conversation about, like, can we invest in things that are women led, that is only women and women's sports, and the same advertisers, marketing companies that invested in Barbie. Barbie has the most intense marketing campaign that I've seen in a long time. If those are the same companies that are also being hired to do women's sports, then it's a choice at that point.
Okay.
Because what we have seen is Barbie has gotten, they've done collaborations all over the place. There's nowhere where you can go and you don't see a pink out. The fact that pink out has become a phrase is a thing that used to be a mean girl saying on Wednesdays we wear pink.
And a lot
Barbie has taken over that,
Yeah.
and you know, all of that is marketing, so they know that it works, and they've grossed that money back.
you
But
see a
they're
lot of
just
young
not-
people, like,
So it's
But-
a choice
yeah.
now when it
Okay.
comes to sports in comparison.
But if I may also say, Barbie has been there for a long time.
So is Mia Hamm. I
Mia
will
Hamm, but
always
that's-
remember her taking
yeah.
off her shirt when she won that
In
gold. I mean,
1999.
Yeah, before the Nigerian did.
Yeah.
Right,
before the Nigerian
right.
did.
Like
Yeah.
she did that. She got penalized for it.
But Barbie has been there since 1950s, right? 40s,
Okay.
long time.
30s.
Long time.
What I'm trying to say
But
is,
also Barbie has been problematic since 1950.
I know because it has always been
A white
one
girl.
side. It has always been, but again, you know, when you're looking at and I agree with what she's saying, but sometimes you look at what you're seeing that is being laid out in terms of how much money is being invested and put in.
Yeah.
Like now, for example, let's look at the WNBA. You know, have I been to one? I've never been. I haven't even been to an NBA game. But when you turn on any NBA game at any time, whenever the season is on, you look at let's say the Wizards,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
Almost full, depending on whoever
Yeah.
is there.
Especially when the
There's
Lakers
always a
come.
crowd.
The
yeah.
Lakers, there's always a crowd.
There's
always
When
a
you
crowd,
flip
yeah.
and you look at, let's say, the WNBA, because sometimes doesn't the WNBA start sort of towards the end of
The NBA
the
season.
NBA
Yeah.
season
to give them like the
to
opportunity.
give them the
exact
opportunity to say
exactly.
to do something, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think there's not that much effort being done. And for me, I'm thinking part of the reason I'm thinking that is because, you know, with America in the system, for the owners or whoever is going to be whoever is going to participate, for them is what return am I getting
Yes.
when I'm investing?
Yeah.
What is my return? Because that's it. That's all that matters
That's
for these guys.
That's the bottom line. But then again, you know, there's that argument of even when, for example, like men's soccer started here in the US, it
Yes.
was not a viable. It was not a viable investment. But then a lot of money was still pushed and put into it until it got to the point where it is. So I think that sometimes, you know, like the argument that's brought up to those who are against this idea of pumping money into women's sports. So yeah, so we now wanna, you know, like slowly, you know, like shift back into the conversation. We have one quick last I don't know whether it's a question or whether it's a comment from Baba Neyman.
Hey, thank you for giving me the
Yeah.
opportunity to say something. Along the lines of the earlier speaker, and to piggyback on the point Uno said, in the US, we all know that everything is a consumer society, so everything is backed by the possibility of the market to respond positive to the opportunity. And to me, if there's an area that has utilized data in the US very well, the marketing area and the military have done this from many years. And if they have known, I mean, since they know that this is not something that it's really going to offer the equal return to what they're going to invest, I think they're slowly going to invest their money sort of like a seed money that, okay, we are putting in what is not, we don't really look for return out of it. So this is a stage what they're doing. The US participating in this competition, even not necessarily putting a lot of money. If you've noticed, there are a lot of foreign players, like for example, Nigerian team, everyone goes to University of Pennsylvania, go to University of Maryland. It's like foreign players, but coming from the US roots and getting the US, start or the US basic to, to spearhead their talent. And I think that's where either the US will benefit the entire world to pull them into the market that they want to drive, and then they benefit out of it. So I think they know the dynamics, and they're thinking, well, if this gets to be aligned with what we wanted, then the market of soccer, especially in the women, it's going to be our world, and we're going to run it for a long time. And I think they have enough. They have invested enough, and they know that they will run the world for quite some time. That's when the compensation is going to be not just within the US, it's going to be outside. Because other players now will start saying, why can't we be compensated like how US players are compensated? So the debate will turn around that, okay, look at how much US is paying their women soccer players, but how about us?
Yes.
We went to school in the US, we play with them, we compete with them, but why don't you compensate out the same? And I think that will be another more heated debate than what it is now.
Very powerful point.
Yeah. So
Very powerful point.
yeah, so I think we are on to a very interesting time, like when it comes to women's soccer and women's sports in general. Like there'll be very interesting times, and we will wait to see what happens. And as the Women's World Cup keeps progressing, we'll wait to see what the outcome is going to be. I'm rooting for South Africa. Mubelo has already said that I pick losers. At least
South Africa ni butabutua.
Yeah, I mean, at least, but what I want to tell Mubelo, at least I pick. Like he waits, he doesn't pick, and will mention, oh, you picked so and so, but he won't make a pick. So me, I'm one of those people. I'd rather deal with someone who's making decisions.
So you're not gonna deal
with someone who's sitting on the fence and waiting on the other side to tell you, oh, you made a bad pick. Anyway, that was sports.
And before you go, Huyu Jamaa Neyman is in about 6 months will be your Stephen A. Smith. I have hope for him. That's from Sambaza podcast. And he continues to say South Africa women team is, I think, paid like the men's team, if I'm not wrong. That we'll have to confirm.
I'm going to give him a Shannon Sharp, not Stephen A. Smith.
You don't like Stephen A. Smith?
Stephen A., I mean, he's okay, but he's sometimes a bit too extra. Sometimes he's a bit too extra, but he's good at what he does.
He's honestly just a hyper guy. He's just a hyper guy. He loves what he's doing.
Yeah, he's a hyper guy. So I think sometimes whatever.
First of all, sorry,
but I think sometimes whatever he says is over exaggerated. I mean, he makes the same. Like there's no sports anchor that I know who's always made correct picks. None, not even the best. But I think the wrong picks that Stephen A. makes are amplified because of his extraness, and and he's also a comical guy. He's an interesting he's an interesting personality to listen to. I actually my dream is for Shannon Sharp to connect with him, because I heard somewhere, I don't know whether it's true, that Skip Bayless is connecting with Lil Wayne, and I was a bit disturbed. I don't know whether it's real, but I saw, I saw
Lil
somewhere.
Wayne.
Yeah, in the rumor mill, in the rumor mill. Yes, Lil Wayne. Yeah,
so we live in interesting times.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
We live in interesting times. You can create your own niche. And some of these things, I believe, as far as what we decide is marketable and not marketable, is self-fulfilled prophecies. There are so many movies, sports, XFL and MMA, which is now successful, but at one point in time was not. There was a lot of investment into these male-dominated sports, and they bankrupted some of the individuals who invested in them, and we don't talk about it as a failure.
Yeah,
It was a
that's true.
choice This was an investment choice.
No, that's
If
true.
you invest in a women's sport and it doesn't give you back a profit, it's kind of like you're waiting for it to fail. There's a mentality there that I feel is unfair and has been created. And so what's happening though is we're living in an era whereby people are looking for authenticity, people are looking for diversity, and people are looking for themselves. And there is half of the population that are not men who are also engaged in sports and or are athletes, whatever percentage of the population that is, and they're looking for themselves as well.
But Annette, the underside of like everyone like trying to look for their own space, what sometimes tends to happen is that you have, what's the name of this YouTube boxing guy? Is he called Paul Logan?
Logan.
Jake
Yeah,
Jake Paul, Logan Paul.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Paul brothers.
Yeah, I mean these people. I mean they're clearly not champions, but they're getting like a lot of views, so a lot of people want to go fight with them.
Yeah,
In East Africa,
Yeah.
we're seeing this situation with this guy called Karim Mandonga. Mandonga, you can even clearly tell by the way he boxes. I mean, he's gone viral. With his ngumi, I don't know, Ndoige, Sugunyo, ngumi imetoka Ukraine or sijui wapi. But you can clearly tell, even from his technique, that this guy is not a good boxer. But because he's been going viral, he's been getting fights. And most recently, like he's lost 2 fights in the span of
10 days.
10 days. He lost to Wanyonyi in Kenya. He lost to a Ugandan called, I think, Moses Golola within 10 days. And then I heard that he's scheduled for another fight in Zanzibar. And this is boxing. Like you're fighting, how many of these fights you're fighting within, like a span of less than a month? That's very dangerous.
12 rounds, 36
Yes.
rounds in a few days.
So let's look at it from a financial perspective and gear towards now the United States, so that we can have some comparison, right? So that's a different demographic in a different market. The United States market is not going to necessarily be threatened by that specifically, right? That's a specific demographic. So in the U.S. demographic, what's happening is, for example, let's talk about Netflix. Netflix took a portion of a particular market share that then threatened other studios, and they were like, wait a second, they didn't notice what was going on because first Netflix was doing DVDs and sending them to your house and all of that. And then, but they didn't realize that while they were using that money, what they were doing was using that money to then fund the platform that has now been created. And now we have a whole phrase of Netflix and
we
chill,
have a
right?
whole beast.
So this is how that progression has occurred, and it has completely changed the market when we come to that. When it comes to sports, it's the same thing. The moment you have a sport that, or the moment you have investment in a sport that's going to cut into a market share, let's say we have some private platforms that decide that they're going to start recording women's sports, for example. Let's say a platform decides to do that, and that starts cutting into NBC Sports, Fox Sports, or whoever, ESPN, their market share, guess what they're going to do? They're going to flip like that. All of a sudden, they're going to start offering and making sure that they have one of their channels dedicated to these sports and these times and things like that. And they're going to promote it so that you don't go to the original source of that. You're going to go to them instead.
Or you're bought out.
And that is the capitalist society that we live in, right? So unfortunately, it's not a matter of whether or not they're more talented or not. That's not what the issue is, and that's what we've come to discover, and that's what the whole legal part of it is about. It's about some of these things that, again, when I say self-fulfilled prophecy, if you invest your money in something and you get a return and you say, okay, I'm successful. If you invest your money and you're not successful, you're like, okay, we're not going to talk about that, right? But with the women's sport, we talk about it so harshly. It's like, either this makes 15% profit, even though my men's sports don't give me that type of profit, or it's dead, So there's going to be a shifting, because we see that shift happening when it comes to content creation, and when it comes to what the average person is consuming is shifting because we have more options, and that's what's going to force the hand.
And one thing that I think is also going to fall, maybe it hasn't fallen right now, is this model of pay-per-view, because when you think about especially younger people who are watching sports, first of all, a lot of younger people are not getting cable. Forget about even pay-per-view. Pay-per-view, you've gone far. A lot of younger people they're not subscribing to cable. And then guess what? They also are not going to be buying this $90, $100, $200 fights. They're not going to do that. So I think if these fight sports don't think quickly, you know, like someone will think for them. You already have Ngannou, you know, like who's now,
Ngannou.
Francis Ngannou. You know, he's out of UFC. He's gone somewhere else to try and you know, and create their own space there.
Isn't he fighting this guy, the current heavyweight champ?
I'm not even sure of what his next fight is, but I know it's not going to be in the UFC.
No, it's not the UFC.
Yeah.
It's with the current champ who beat Wilder.
Yeah.
What's his name? This Irish guy, the gypsy guy.
You're talking about Tyson Fury?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Are they not supposed to be?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I
There's
heard
been something
about
that. Sometime
Yeah.
in September
And
or October.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Sambaza is also mentioning an interesting thing that I also had on NPR about cricket. It started in the grassroots now. There's a league in the US. Plano, Texas has a cricket stadium. Watch it the next 10 years.
In my district, they campaigned until they got cricket fields, and there are some teams, and mostly Southeast Asian. There's a Bengali team, Nepalese team, but yeah.
Then you also have
coming
West
up.
Indians, Caribbeans who also play cricket.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that the field is there, now people are coming.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, I
Yeah,
didn't know that all
interesting.
these
Remember,
people were interested in this sport.
Why are you not telling us? I think like is somewhere in Gators in Montgomery County that even a cricket. This is some time back.
Yes. No, in
Several years back.
Yeah, in Montgomery County, cricket has been played because we have a lot of Indians and South Asians in Montgomery County.
Yes.
So
I've
people have been
seen-
playing
I've seen.
cricket, you know, there for a while.
So like
wonderful.
now cricket. There's Major League Rugby.
Yes, rugby is
is
another
coming-
sport
it's
that's
coming
also
up.
coming up.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
You
So
know,
rugby has been primarily played
In
for
colleges.
club and colleges,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And it becoming something that is acknowledged greater than that is particularly significant because there has always been what the market people have said, a competition with American football. But the reality is the demographic of people who are interested in these sports are significantly different and or they overlap. So you don't have to pick one or the other.
yes.
And then, you know, also American football. It's also a sport that maybe it's not being talked about, but it's a sport that its popularity is reducing, especially with people's attention spans being shorter. Most people don't want to sit, you know, like on a Sunday for 3
Wow.
hours
Yeah,
to watch a
3.5
game. You know,
hours,
like
yeah.
especially that's what happened to baseball. You know, and baseball they're now trying to shorten the game.
They have shortened the
amount of
rules.
commercial breaks.
Yes.
Like, it's, people are not gonna want to watch it.
Yeah, people are not gonna want to watch that, you know, like anymore, you know. So
Maybe they'll
And
watch like the
baseball was the
playoffs
American
and the World
pastime.
Series.
yes, it was the American pastime. You know,
Yeah.
now, you know, like black people especially, they don't watch baseball. They don't even play baseball. You know, like it's just one of those sports that you know about, but you don't even follow.
Now, by the way, over here, Louis C. Muya says Lil Wayne is going to be featured on weekly on Undisputed.
Yeah.
I guess featured is not.
So I don't know
that's another
exactly what
different
that
story.
means. Yeah.
But I was going to say when I take for example soccer. For a while, Americans did not understand how 45-45. You're done.
Yeah.
This past
no,
weekend,
no timeouts.
no timeouts.
Yeah.
Right? No timeouts whatsoever. This past weekend, taken my nephew had gone for there was a Aston Villa, Fulham, Aston Villa, and Mosh was there. Aston
Chelsea.
Villa and
Are you
I
talking
can't
about the
remember
summer
who-
series?
Yeah, the summer
Yeah,
series.
the summer series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those-
Then there was Chelsea versus Fulham and Aston Villa versus some other. I can't remember the team. Brentford.
Brentford, yeah.
Brentford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, place was packed.
Yes.
It was packed, and we're talking about soccer.
Yeah.
So there's also an influx of a lot of soccer-loving people who have. I can say. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they love soccer. Immigrated here. Soccer fans.
A lot of Americans are going to watch
Yeah.
it. And the Manu Arsenal game in New Jersey, I
was-
went to
was
watch
packed.
it. It was over 82,000.
Yes.
And that was a friendly game.
A
It's
friendly.
Premier League
Yeah.
teams. It's Premier League teams.
Yeah.
Yes.
It
These
was a
European
friendly
teams,
game.
Like,
So-
when you bring them to the States, it's gonna get views. It's gonna
Yeah.
get views. Like
When
Yeah.
Rebecca Lowe and the Premier League team, when they have that Premier League morning,
yeah.
when they're touring,
they come to the U.S.
They come to the US.
Yeah.
It's madness.
Americans are watching.
And you don't.
I
Americans
always
are
watch in the
watching.
morning.
It used to be an immigrant sport, but I'm telling you, Americans are watching because
Yes.
even when I was in New Jersey, I mean, you can tell, like there's quite a bunch of Americans here.
Yes.
Like out of those 82,000,
Yes.
you can tell there's
Yes.
quite a number of Americans here.
But also a lot of immigrants.
Yes, there are a lot of
Yes.
immigrants,
The
but
immigrants are gonna be there, but
But I mean,
we have people who are watching, and we have people who are paying to watch, right? So we have the immigrant community who is watching, who are going to watch, right? And there's a larger community of non-immigrant individuals who are actually going to go on the stage to pay, and that's something that's significant when you look at those numbers. So there might be a greater fan base that are immigrant individuals, but why is it worth it to come and have your summer leagues here in the United States? Because there's a population that's willing to pay for those tickets.
yes,
Of course.
absolutely.
Right, and it's
yeah.
not 100% immigrant born
No.
individuals.
No.
Who doesn't want to watch
obviously.
Raheem Sterling play for Chelsea?
Right there, and
I know,
and
I
the other
don't.
thing too that we also have to recognize is that these are athletes, yes, and they perform on that level, but they're also celebrities. They're also people who come to our red carpets here in the U.S. They're also people who have very beautiful model wives, and those are things that are going to now attract, especially this,
Yeah, Lukaku.
especially this,
mean, think about-
society of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Lukaku and Megan the Stallion. Yeah, I'm just saying.
He failed him. He failed her. He failed her in the Champions League. Like she was,
Eh?
people were saying, "Oh, she expected him to do well," but he didn't.
All right. Anyway, that was sports. There's a lot more to discuss, and of course, we're gonna come back next week to review,
Thank you,
the
Damon.
Women's World Cup and the different things that have been happening in the World Cup. And of course, here Jodo Mole is saying that rugby is a private school sport. Afro Jamaican is saying in my city there are over 400 cricket teams waiting on space to play. It's big in Ontario, Canada. So yeah,
And
yeah, I
actually,
know.
to talk about that comment, in my school, rugby's during the springtime, and it's actually now becoming a big sport in my school. Yeah, it's actually
It is becoming a big sport.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is becoming a big sport. Yeah. So Annette, before we forget, we want to go back to the conversation that we were having so that we can conclude this topic about
Should we
fast.
should we ask Naman maybe
Okay,
what his
before
experience?
yes.
in terms of
Okay, so before we go
Yes,
back to you, Annette, maybe Neyman, you were listening to the conversation at the
Sure.
beginning,
Yeah.
and maybe just tell us, what are your thoughts from that conversation? What did you pick up? Were there any alerts that you got? But just tell us what was going through your mind
Maybe
when you
what
were
was the
listening to that
most
conversation.
significant thing that stood out to you that you would want to comment on?
So for me, it's actually something to think about. Oh yeah. So could you actually like explain a little?
So we
like-
were talking
yeah.
about what it's like to be, we have some African born, Kenyan born
Right.
parents who have come to this country, and then those of us who came, and we're second generation, but we're first generation as far as going through the school system from
Because
from
what
birth
did stand out to me, right? What
Mhm.
did stand out to me was like the idea of not laughing at your kids and not laughing at someone
Yes.
trying to learn the language, like trying to learn about your culture. So for me, I'm learning Swahili in my home, and like my parents encourage, and they don't laugh or like discourage me in any way, because it's definitely something, especially for younger kids, that is definitely like it affects them. It really does affect them.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah.
definitely.
Congratulations to your parents, and I hope they continue to do.
that.
Okay.
Good job. Good job.
Good
So
job. Job well
at what
done.
point
appreciate that.
I don't know what chapter you're in your learning of Swahili, but at what point are we gonna be able to sit here and have
a
an
whole
interview in
conversation.
Swahili, have banter in Swahili?
Next chapter.
How long maybe are you giving yourself?
I think that's an unfair question.
Yeah.
It is an
It's a
unfair
very
question.
unfair question.
It's a
Honestly,
very
it
unfair
depends.
question.
It
but-
depends,
Maybe
like-
what are your
Be-
language
because
goals?
because it's an unfair question, but it's also fair because I'm also a language teacher and I have experience teaching kids who've been born in this country
Okay.
the language. So there's certain things, as much as they sound unfair, it sometimes pays to listen to the teacher, and it's good to know, like also the goals, because the goal could be specific tasks that you want to accomplish in the language, and goals could also be specific time. Like maybe you want to go back to Tanzania maybe for an internship or for a summer. So it could also be time. So it could be whatever you have in your mind in as far as
See,
what you want to
when you
achieve.
expound like this,
Yeah.
those who are listening,
Okay.
when you expound like this,
Mm-hmm.
that gives more insight and makes the question less intimidating. And so I
Okay.
appreciate that. I
Okay.
appreciate that. What's your answer? What's your goal?
My goal. So honestly, like it depends on how committed, like in general, it depends on how committed that person is to learning the language.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I definitely say, I wouldn't say like an exact time, but it like what I was saying, it just depends on the person, how committed they are to the process of learning the language. So it can really, like, the time just differs. The time differs for whoever, but
Okay.
yeah, I'll give myself maybe a few months. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right.
I love
That's
that.
that's good enough because there's someone I'm talking to. Their goal is to be able to have a conversation with a grandma, and
Yes.
and that to me is a very noble goal because they love each other, but when they're seated together they can't communicate because like with people who the grandma is cannot read or write, so you cannot use those apps that people are using right now for
There's no
language
app for
learning.
that.
Yeah, for language learning. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And I think like also teachers also need to be very honest with students when it comes to language learning, because one thing I've not liked within the American system of learning languages, especially in colleges, the goal is never to give you competency to speak, because you'll get people who will tell you, oh, I did 4 years of Spanish in high school, but they can barely express themselves, or
Right.
like when they're with a Spanish person. So you wonder, what exactly were you doing for these 4 years if you cannot just have
Right.
a simple conversation? And it's the same with college. There are these requirements that you're supposed to have for a foreign language. So, and even the way like it's taught, it's just different. I did sit in a class in college here where they were I had like learned some French in Kenya, and when I took like a French class in an American college, I was really surprised and really shocked at how it was being taught, because it was being taught in English. And the French that I had started learning, I did a bit of it in high school. I did go to Alliance Francaise, like in Kenya. And the last time I remember, like the teacher speaking English was the first day that we met. And that's the last time, and they keep building up, and that's how you build language skills.
Right.
This thing of learning in English, which is what I think in the American context people know, it's not gonna work. If your goal is to go back, speak to your grandmother, interact socially with people, have conversations, when it comes to language, that's not gonna work. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable positions. You have to put yourself in a position where you're like a toddler, like you're talking about, where you don't care that you're making mistakes, where you're out learning. Like every time, if you don't feel that discomfort when you're learning a language, you're constantly feeling comfortable, but when you're thrown into the deep end, you can't speak, then that means there's something wrong that you're doing. So I think sometimes it's also good
Right.
to give this reality check.
And something I want to say as well is that what I really liked for like the past 2 years, my sophomore year in high school, I learned Spanish from a white man, but it's not. It's
All of my teachers were white too.
exactly. But what I really loved was that my junior year, I learned Spanish from a Mexican man. I learned from a native man of the culture, the language. So he really did challenge us and allow us to understand his perspective. Like he really wanted us, like his goal was for us to be able to at least, say a sentence, because something that we did like towards the end of like each quarter was like write an essay.
Yeah.
Like write an essay in Spanish. Like you couldn't use like Google Translate or like Spanish dictionary or like
Chat GPT.
Chat GPT.
Now there's Google Bird.
Exactly. There's so
Yeah.
many of these things.
Yep.
But he really challenged us and wanted us to understand his culture. Like he gave us, like it opened our eyes to understand his culture by him being a native man and sitting in front of that classroom teaching us every day. So I really did love that, and I definitely got better at Spanish. But tracking back, talking about like my goal for Swahili, I definitely like want to have a conversation like in a few months time. Like a few months time,
Okay.
conversations ideal. Like,
Okay. All right.
yeah,
That's great.
All right. So
Definitely,
that's
yeah.
good. Thank you so much. and we really appreciate your contribution. Now,
time
yeah, same
next
time
week.
next week.
next week
Okay.
with more
Definitely.
on sports. So what's your sign out? How do you sign out? And no, how do you sign out if you're doing a sports segment? If you've been given the whatever, how do you say?
I appreciate the opportunity. It's Namaruta, and I'm out for now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
We'll work on that.
That's the
We'll
start.
work on that.
That's
We'll work
the
on that.
start. That's the start.
Yeah.
That's the start.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a start. That's a
We'll
start.
work on that.
Start. No. We'll work on it.
Passing the baton.
Definitely.
Passing the baton right there.
Passing the baton. You're
Exactly.
seeing it live in action.
And it's important. Take notes. You know,
Okay.
challenge those who are younger than you. Give them an opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and then also give them the sidebar so they can get the tips and grow. In
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Now back to the conversation we're having. Annette, you told me that young people here are disconnecting from their families and saying that they can't have relationships with their parents. These are, like second generation parents, and they're first generation kids. So you're saying that there's a disconnect that's happening. Like what exactly did you mean that people can no longer have relationships with their parents?
Mm-hmm. I think there is a point in time where, for example, in previous generations, if you live in the context of Kenya and you've grown up in Kenya, you don't have the ability to compare yourself to other individuals and the type of the relationships that they were having with their parents. And so I've had the ability to see and have very intimate relationships with people. And when I say intimate, I mean the types of conversations that we were having there was no limits on a topic that we could not discuss. And this is now with the parents of my peers. So when I go home, and this can be at any level, this can be in elementary school, and you realize that I know for me, when I was in elementary school, I had friends who were very physically affectionate with their parents, and I didn't grow up in a home that was like that. And so when I saw it, and then I was like, oh man, that's something I'm craving. I would love to have really long hugs and kisses and stuff like that. And my Kenyan parents
African parents, Kenyan parents.
are like, I don't know what this is that you're bringing into this house, but we don't do that, you know. But the only reason why I was able to one of the main reasons why I was able to have that is because of the comparison of the culture that I was seeing outside.
Yeah.
And it's not that the outside culture is bad, it's just that the context is different. And so again, the parents who have made the decision to bring their families here for wonderful reasons that they've done that. It's on them. It's their obligation, because they're the older ones and the wiser ones, to help fill in that gap. And there's some places that you don't see the blind spots. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
So this is not a matter of pinpointing blind spots and shaming you for not seeing them. This is a matter of there's some things that can be very, very obvious that maybe need to be broached, and maybe you have to work on yourself individually, or just even have a conversation with your kid and be like, listen, this is not something that I can do in my culture. Or let me not say in my culture, I dislike that phrase. In the culture we come from, it's a better phrase. Don't say in my culture, it separates you, because it's my culture versus you and your culture. And what culture does your child have? Okay, they're not Americans, so what culture does your child have? Don't say in my culture. In the culture we come from, it's very difficult for us to have these conversations directly as a parent to a child. But what we did do is you had uncles and you had aunties. And so these are some people that I think that might be good for you to talk to.
Okay.
And I might even let them know, hey, my kid has some questions that are beyond me. Please, when they come to you, feel free. Even just giving that permission to that auntie, feel free. You guys talk whatever you guys are going to talk, because for me, this is beyond me. I cannot do it. And that's okay.
Okay. But now where do we draw the line in as far as, also being empathetic to the parents? Like you don't just start, if you come from a place where you don't see you don't see dads giving long hugs to their daughters. This is not something that you can just pick up overnight.
Right.
And start doing.
Right.
So at what point do we also give the parents grace in that they're trying their best to make it comfortable for you here, but there's certain things that they will miss, not because, they don't want to do it, but it's just that, after there's so many years, if your parent is like 50 or 60 years old, after all those years of conditioning, to live in a certain way. It's just hard to flip a switch.
Mm-hmm. I would say, at what point in time do you realize your children have been giving you grace this whole time?
No.
And this is-
But I'm talking here in the on the parents' context.
I understand,
Yes.
but I'm saying, as a child,
Yeah.
at what point in time do the parents recognize that the child has been giving them grace this whole time? Because the child is the only person who understands that this parent has never been to school. This person has never faced these things that I face. This parent has never prepared me for racism the way that I've experienced it in school because they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
This parent does not have the ability to understand the nuance of language. You can speak the English language and not understand the culture behind it.
Yeah.
So we understand that. We've been understanding this whole time that we've been growing up here. So the truth of the matter is there is so much grace that is being given to our parents this entire time. In addition to that, we've been told, you have to understand when we came from Kenya. You have to understand when we were walking those 5 kilometers. You have to understand, you have to understand, you have to understand. So this whole time we have been conditioned that we have to take the burden of understanding our parents. And there has not been a point in time where our parents have said, let me take the time to understand you.
So is there anything that the parents are doing right? You know, is there
many
anything?
things. Oh my gosh, so many things. So the things our parents are doing right. Apart from saying my culture, we have a culture that's so beautiful. It's so lively. We have our bracelets. All of us wear them. It's like if you don't have one, you cannot be one of us. We have an ability to kind of skip some of the identity crisis that occurs with amongst our peers because we, as those who are Black American, those who came from Africa, not by choice. We have the ability to say, you know, we came here by choice. We have these cultures. We have these histories and why we got here. Some of us are green card holders. Some of us are, you know, our parents rebelled against the government. Some people were, you know, diplomats. There's a rich history and culture
There's a diversity.
as to why it is that we got here. And it's super exciting to be able to have that. And then also to be able to share that. And not to be confused about who it is that we are. So we identify as American because we are here and this is the place that we love.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. But we also know that there's another place for us. There's another home.
call
There's an
home.
ancestral land.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother culture that we can you know, dive into. So for example, right now that we're living in a time whereby books are being banned by authors who look like us. Who come from you know, the U.S. and have been here for hundreds of years. And you know, in Kenya though, there are some books that have not been banned, you know, that I can go and reach out to and still be able to feel some sort of connection.
Yeah.
And that has been amazing. Our parents have, you know, they didn't come here and start learning how to cook burgers immediately. So we still have our food. We still have nyama choma. We still have ugali and skuma and all of that is super important and rich. And we have our get-togethers, we have our gatherings, we have our cookouts, we have our barbecues, we have our
Okay.
language. There's so many good and beautiful things. And I think it is a mistake to focus on the negative. When someone brings you a criticism, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It means we have an area that we can improve upon. And it's up to you to decide that you want to improve upon that thing or if you want to leave that thing alone.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So I mean, this is a conversation that I think could be like a manual to both sides. You know, like
Yeah.
if you're a first gener and if you're a parent, not even necessarily a parent, just someone who has any interaction with first generation Kenyans. You know, it could be anyway. It could be through social settings. It could be through entertainment. It could be through, you know, like religious practices. Now, you know, like I sometimes, you know, like I've had these kinds of conversations, these private conversations with first gen Kenyans who are Muslims, because now they're dealing with a couple of different things.
Right.
They're dealing with the fact that they come from a different country, a different culture, and then also a different religion, you know. And of course, Muslims are a minority of a minority in the U.S. We are very few. We are still very few, in as much as people tend to think that we're so many. We still tend to
And
be
the
very few.
subgroups,
Yeah.
ethnic groups.
Yeah, and I think an advantage, I feel, and I think this is a conversation that can be better had by by a Muslim first gener, but just from conversations I've had with them, I think an advantage that we tend to have is that culturally, as Muslims, regardless of whatever part of the world you come from, there's certain things that we have in common. So there's always a tendency for Muslims to settle in places where there's a mosque, whereby you can go interact. So you'll still find certain people who share certain aspects of your culture, like in good numbers. So that tends to play, like a certain advantage, because you're not making big changes as a Muslim, like coming from Kenya to a Muslim coming to settle in the United States. And an interesting thing that I was mentioning to a friend of mine, there's no such thing as a Kenyan mosque. There's no such thing as a Tanzanian mosque or a Cameroonian mosque. The way we have it with churches, it's whatever mosque is in that community that you've gone, that's where you go and attend. Like that's something that I think also, like baffles us, like as Muslims, when we see these ethnicized places of worship, like churches and other places of worship. So it kind of, like gets us a bit off guard, especially coming from Kenya. I don't know whether places of worship were ethnicized. Let me speak for Nairobi. I don't know the places of worship were ethnicized in Nairobi. So to me, that was a new experience. Like when I was new here and I was coming and I was hearing about, like these ethnicized churches. So for us, for Muslims, there's some type of uniformity and some comfort that you'll still find, but then now you have to deal with all these other issues outside your community, whereby you're not an American, and then again you're also not practicing the faith that a majority of people are practicing out there. So you also have to deal with that.
That's a lot of layers, and I think because I'm not from that community, what I can speak to is in the Catholic Church we have, you can just find whatever Catholic church is near you.
Yeah.
You go to whatever service is there, and for the most part, it's going to be in English. But we do have churches that will have a Spanish service, and there are some churches that will do a Swahili service, and it might not be every day. It might be, once a month.
Okay.
And in that once a month, that's where you will find all of the East Africans have gone to the Swahili service or things of that nature. And what I have found, even in the Catholic Church, for example, there are some priests that I know who are from East Africa, Kenya or Tanzania, but they also speak Spanish and English, and maybe they've been stationed. I know one who lives somewhere in the Midwest, and so he has a congregation that there are a lot of Spanish people, and so he speaks Spanish, English, and he also speaks Swahili. And so yeah, that is something that I think is a little bit similar when it comes to compare what you're discussing. We kind of just all go to the same place. If you are Catholic, for those who are non-Catholic, that's where you kind of see more of that. That separation, and it's honestly, it's not an African thing. And so we have white churches, we have black churches, we have Hispanic churches, and so that thing is kind of something that you see in the United States very often.
Okay. And then what's the relation of and of course you're not speaking for all first geners, but just for the ones, for the majority that what's your relation about, how do you relate to this issue of sending kakitu back home via Sendwave? Kakitu. Aka 20 bob. Yeah.
I always feel like 20 bob can go in my pockets.
Wow.
Here in the US. And I don't say that in
Hater.
I'm not a hater. I don't say that in I say that because our friends and our friends, our family back home, they do not see the sacrifices that happen here in the US when you're sending that 20 bob, when you're sending that $100 back home to your family
Is
members.
not seeing or
Who
lack of
sees
understanding.
it? No. They do not see it because they do not have any context of what it's like to be in America, to work those jobs, to be able to have that $100 to be able to send back home. Okay?
Got it.
They don't have that context, and they will never have that context unless they come here. But those of us who live here, who are seeing our parents struggling, even if they're doing okay, but they're making a choice, there's always an opportunity cost. This $100, maybe it could have gone, or maybe this might, because COVID was a very great example. Because my family member got sick with COVID back home, and now they're in hospital. We don't know. We're in a pandemic. People are worried. Everyone is scared, and you're sending all this money back home, right?
Yes.
Meanwhile, you have kids in the house with nothing to do, and you're not able to spend money to give them, even books for them to read or activities for them to do, places that they can go safely and things like that. That money has been spent now for an auntie that you've never met. Think about it.
Netflix.
This is an auntie you've never met somewhere who's dying, who needs this $800. It almost sounds like a fairy tale.
You are named after her.
No, I wasn't named after any auntie.
No, I'm just saying sometimes.
Just to add to make you feel like you should be more empathetic, and the truth of the matter is there's a disconnect, and so they can build resentment. If I ask, PS5 was very hard to get. There was supply chain issues. If a child is like, man, I really want a PS5, can you get me a PS5? It's like, it's $500, maybe $600 with a markup, whatever the case may be. At one time, it was $1,000, but we would never, we will never ask at that point. There was a time before it was that, right? So let's say we're asking when it's $650. It's a $100 markup, right? $650. I want to get this PS5. It's just come up. I want to play with my friends. We're in a pandemic. The only way I'm going to be able to hang out with my friends is if I have these things to play with them, right? Because that's a big way that people
read a book.
And connect with people. We're social beings. We're talking about children.
You can connect with the Mizambo.
Sir, we're talking about children, right? So I'm asking you, hey, can I get this PS5? I want to play this game. I want to connect with my friends. I haven't seen them. School has been shut down because abruptly we didn't even have a chance to say goodbye.
There was no chance to even pull your pencils out of your locker.
All that stuff is done, right? So can I get this thing because I know my friend has it, and if we have this thing together, then we can play together,
and we can connect
get
online.
That connection back, right?
Correct.
We can get that connection back. No, I don't have that money for it. But then the very next week, you're talking about a sick auntie who needs $800 so that they can go to.
But that's a life. That's a life.
That's a life being saved.
That's a life versus.
This is not what I'm saying. You guys are speaking like adults.
Okay, sorry.
I'm talking about from the child's point of view. It hurts. It hurts that a week ago, when you had that same money that you're sending to auntie.
Yes.
It was a no for me.
I hadn't gotten paid.
Bruh. You are talking like you just came from Kenya the other day and you're working under table jobs. At some point in time, we're making good money. We're getting checks every 2 weeks. If you wanted to, if the answer was yes, you would figure out your paycheck to pay for that PS5. It's the automatic no and the automatic yes for them. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It's an automatic yes for them and an automatic no for us. That's very hurtful.
I think that's the reason why I think one key lesson for parents here is that automatic no's worked, when we're being raised back in Kenya, but automatic no's don't work for kids over here. I think if you have an intention of saying no, just be prepared.
It was a look.
Be prepared. Be prepared
to have an answer.
Yeah,
that
be
makes
prepared
sense.
with an explanation.
Yes,
with an explanation that that's truthful. Not that I don't have money. Just be prepared with an explanation that makes sense to that kid's context. Don't just say no, because no's. No's worked for us. No, I want a computer game or whatever. No, that's good enough. It worked for us. But for kids here,
But today,
yeah.
why?
But that's what I'm
It's
saying.
what follows.
That's what I'm saying.
and they know it's there, right? So,
Now, and here's the thing. Okay, sure. All those perspectives are great. Okay, this is one thing that I know is very important for all parents, and that's keeping our kids safe. The
Correct.
number one thing you can do to keep your kids safe from predators, from being, hoodwinked or whatever, is to build up their self-confidence. When you keep giving them no's, when you don't give them explanations, when it's my way or the highway, they're going to accept that outside of the home, and that's not safe.
Yeah.
correct.
If someone comes
someone
up
else
to
will
me
give
and
an
says,
alternative.
I have told you, you need to get in my car right now, and you can't ask me why, and that's what I'm saying, and I'm going to call your mother because you didn't listen to me. They're going to get in that car and be lost for the rest of their days. And that happens all the time. And you got to understand, black and brown people don't get looked for the same way as other people. Okay?
That is true.
You have to protect your children. This is not just a matter of, I shouldn't be having to explain to you why these things. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? No.
I'm the adult, you're the child.
Let's think about the context in which we're living in. The one of the best things I've ever heard online, with advice about how to prepare their children, it was build up their self-confidence. And you have to really, really think what that means. They need to be able to articulate. They need to be able to understand the context in which they're in. If you're giving them a no, it's very okay to say no. No, and my no is a no. And this is the reason why I'm giving you a no, and you can't question me. But let me tell you something. If somebody out there tells you no, you better ask them every single question as to why that is, because I don't need you accepting lower pay. I don't need you accepting unsafe environments. I don't need you accepting an abusive relationship just because someone said. But in the context of this home, I need you to understand I have limited resources, and there are many of you, and I have many people depending on me, and I'm going to make sure that each of you guys gets your basic needs. If you understand that versus, you know what I mean? Like, this is how we protect our kids.
Okay, and I think that's something that, because protecting our kids back home was shutting the gate. You know, like, don't open the door for anyone. Mm-hmm. That was protecting our kids. But then there's a lot of
locking the rotary phone with that padlock.
With a padlock, yeah, so that they can't call. But we have a lot of other dynamics that we're dealing here, especially in the digital space, whereby your kid could be safely locked inside the house, but there's someone who's connecting with them. Online. You know, like online, without you knowing. Yeah, but back to that question of sending money. So first, Janice, you guys, you don't send money back home.
Who would we send money to?
Who does she know?
Whom do I have a relationship with back home
Cousin
that
Jane.
I would feel?
I mean, the reason I'm asking is because, you know, like, people they travel a lot. No, not even social only. There's your generation travels a lot back to Kenya. Reconnect with the family and everything. You never get these messages from people.
Sure, and I say no.
That you know, there's this.
But you didn't give them an
explanation. But did you give them an explanation?
Yes.
What was the explanation?
Well, cousin one time asked me for money for a particular item. In case he watches, I won't say exactly what it was. But a cousin of mine asked for an item. It's $50. I gave it to him. Mm-hmm. Then the next 2 weeks, he asked me for $100 for something else, and I said, "Listen." I really, really expected that $50 was going to do exactly what you said, because he had told me that this item was going to help him make more money. This was an investment in his ability
investment.
Yeah.
This was an investment in his ability to do something for himself,
yeah.
right? And he'd never asked me before. So I said, listen, I have responsibilities here that are a priority to me. I had the ability the last time to give you. But moving forward, I'm not going to have the ability to give you money at a moment's notice. That's not something that I can do, okay? I have children
so
here.
you let them know.
I let them know, and I'm very clear. I have children here. I have this here, whatever. If that thing that I invested in was able to do something for you, I'm so grateful.
Great.
You know?
Okay.
And I didn't ask if he bought the thing. I didn't, you know, he could have gone, and I don't know. I don't know if he did.
So Omosh, why is it difficult for us? Because
us
I don't know, but I know for us.
Us is who?
No, us, you,
those of you who send money all the time.
The ones who send. No, it's difficult for us. Even when we're saying
you
no.
will see us after class.
No, the difficulty is not even in sending the money. It's when you want to say no, we would not necessarily put it in the pointed way that you put it.
Because we were not brought up with saying no the way that Annette would say no.
But do you think it's a factor
was
of
I
being...
brought up with it?
Do you think it's
Yes.
a factor? Do you think it's a factor of being brought up, or the fact that there's still some emotional connection whereby you understand, you've probably been in that position before, and maybe you understand where that person is coming from, so you can't just hit, like on the chin.
I don't know if I would say that we've been in that position. Because we've taken that poll here and even asked ourselves amongst you guys in the studio, like, did you really did you go without?
Yeah,
and we can't say that we went without.
But there are people within our context who've gone without.
Correct.
Yeah.
So us in particular, we haven't gone without, right? So I'm trying to eliminate that as a factor. But I think our connection stems from either you grew up with this person,
yes,
you know this person, and you have you think you have an intimate relationship with them,
yeah,
until you find out that your intimacy stops at the financial,
yeah,
right.
And then you get to a net stage of no. In fact, your no might even be worse than Annette's.
My no is very polite, but let me tell you something. Let's take it from an American context that maybe people can relate to.
Yeah.
Shark Tank. There are people on Shark Tank who will give someone $1 million, $100,000, $20,000 to invest in their whatever it is that they have presented on Shark Tank. And they will-
Mr. Wonderful.
and they will never give that money to their own family members. Why? The reason is not that they don't have. The reason is not that they don't have emotional connection with these. Actually, I don't know. I can't speak personally, but maybe the reason is not that they don't have emotional connection. The reason is the person who's coming on Shark Tank has a plan. They have an idea. Even if it goes badly, they have tried. They've given you something. When someone is sending me a text message for money from Kenya, it's for nothing.
It's a grant.
You want me to give you money,
It's a
and
grant.
there's gonna be no return, and so now you're
Yeah,
tapped.
there is
I'm
no
the oil
ROI.
that you have tapped, and so you can just keep coming and
Yeah,
pulling.
there's no ROI. That is
and
true.
that to me is problematic. If we had entrepreneurial parents, and some of us do, and it's very impressive when I see it, and they're like, okay, so my family back home was struggling. These are the things that I did. I went and I invested in a well or a borehole, and we went and got water. So now that water issue, I'm not paying for water anymore, right? So when you're invested in that, I'm not sending money every week so that you can get water brought to your house.
Yeah, with the
I've
Bowser,
invested, so now
yes.
you can get the water. That makes sense to me, okay?
Yeah.
And then you continue. Okay, now we have a shop. Now we have this. Now you go, and then at some point in time, it's like, Connie, the shop isn't doing anything.
Yeah, no, you're right.
What about investing in education? From kindergarten to
Yeah, like paying school fees.
paying
that
school fees.
Paying school fees is a big
kindergarten to
one. Paying school fees
to,
is a
uni-
big
to,
one.
to university.
Speaking of
For-
paying,
For your
University.
cousin who has 3
Speaking of
kids
paying
and
school fees,
Yeah.
doesn't
Kai-
have a job.
Kaiser Sose here says, I have a security guard who asks me for money all the time. I told her I'm going to block her. She know I'm buying land and she thinks money grows on trees. I even offered to have her use some of my land for farming.
Which means working.
But she says
It's too far. I blocked her.
And that's but here's the thing, we've created a culture, and I think there are people back home who's like, oh yeah, I have my so and so abroad, I have this person abroad, and even them, they can go and drink their whatever and come together, whether it's tea or whatever, and say, yeah, you know what, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ask that family member who is abroad because they're doing so much better than we are. And it's a bad culture, because what happens is we have a significant amount of GDP in Kenya that comes from abroad, but it's not actually building the Kenyan economy. It's supporting people without giving
But it is.
them.
and
It's
that's
supporting people, and it's stimulating the economy. It's the same as getting a stimulus check. As you know, the stimulus check is very different than going to work and getting a check, and it does different things economics wise.
and that's an interesting point to bring up, because remittances from the diaspora
Are more than tourism.
They're more than tourism, and a lot of this money, unfortunately, is not going into any kind of productive investments. And I think that's where the problem is with a lot of this money that's coming from the diaspora. And then there's also a lot of what's called dead capital. You go, you build a castle in the village. Now, first of all, this castle that you've built, it's gonna benefit, like the builders, the caretaker, or whoever. But then you can't rent it out. It can't generate it's in the village. You can't build a castle in the village and then say that you're renting it out. But I think some Kenyans.
But Ali, not everything in the village needs to be rented, or not every castle you built needs to be rented.
But that's what I'm saying.
If your investment was just for that, for you to use it for your 2 months when you're home, then that's what you used it
That's
for.
good. The point is about the continuing
That's
spending
okay.
the money.
That's okay.
No, what Ali is saying is that you should never have sunk that
No,
money.
no,
there
no.
in the
I mean,
first place.
for me, speaking as like as a financial advisor, that's definitely a bad investment. Investing in something where you go stay for 2 weeks, because you don't go there every year for 2 months. You'll most likely be there for 2 weeks, because when you go to Kenya, you wanna go to Mombasa, you wanna go to Masai Mara, you wanna go to Nanyuki, wherever.
But you don't do that every year. You can't do that every year.
So, but that's what I'm saying. Like there's a very because people are usually very ambitious. Like whenever they're making these investments, and that's the reason why you go to a lot of Kenyan villages. You see, you see a lot of little shops, like selling knickknacks and this and that. But then like there will always be those little shops. What people sometimes don't look at is opportunity cost. Someone looks at it like, okay, I'm rich, like I have a job that's paying me like X amount of money, so I can afford this. So affording is one thing, but the opportunity cost, what this money would have been doing like rather than just building an asset that you're gonna use, like once in and I think that's where even that conflict sometimes comes with you first gen, as where you're looking, like you're looking at your living situation over here with your parents, and then your parent is busy building castles back home. In fact, I want you to talk about that because
Let's talk about it.
Because Kenyans love mafuroti maguta and they love building. They love.
Why are
they
you
love
looking at me?
bricks.
Why are you looking at me like that?
I know. I was just shaking my head. I was tired. You know the way the show has been going.
Nonsense.
I was just,
Is this the part where we put a disclaimer and we say these are all Annette's thoughts? And
No, these
no
are
one
not.
like
And
These
at
do not
least-
belong to
yeah,
anyone.
Ali and Annette's
no,
thoughts and has nothing to do with the One Mic show.
no. The reason I'm saying this, we want to hear this from because I have my very personal views that are sometimes considered extreme. Like within my
You've been extreme for a while,
yeah,
so it's okay.
within budget. But let's hear it from now. Like the people who are entitled to support from their parents when they see their parents doing these things at a time when I'm not saying that at a time when you're poor, but at a time when maybe you feel like you could be doing better than where you are. So Annette, maybe you talk to us and give us your perspective on this.
Broti,
Okay,
maguta,
so-
maguta.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is legacy. And there is a verse that says a wise man brings an inheritance for his sons or for his children. And that is something that's really important to me because some of these things are actually inheritance. And it's not that it needs to be a divide between those who are growing up here and those who came here as an adult. What happens, though, is there's a disconnect because you've done all of these things without including your children. And they're supposed to just appreciate it, but they had nothing to do with them in the first
In
place.
the decision
And
making.
so, over the time, maybe since the time that your child has been 9 years old up until the time that they're now an adult, you've been building this place and cultivating and doing all of these wonderful things, and they were never involved in it. And they're supposed to go to this house after graduation and just love it and be like, I'm so excited, I'm going to move back to Kenya. That's very unrealistic. Now, what happens here in the States when you're going to buy a house, you go house hunting, maybe you go with your significant out there, but many times you go with your children as well.
Correct.
And you get to, and now the child, oh, this is going to be my room. They've invested.
They're part of the process, yes.
They've invested before the house is even bought. They've had 5 different rooms because they've seen 5 different houses, right? Oh, this is going to be my room. And we're going to play outside. And can we buy a swing set, in this backyard? And I was like, they're so invested in this place, right? So now when it comes to what happens, for the next chapter in life, if their parents are not going to be there, the house in America is the one that they're going to be worried about. That's the one they have all their memories in. That's the one that they were there when they were house hunting and they gave their ideas and all of this stuff. And now they have this connection. We can do a better job of including our children in the choices that we make back home and making sure that they have a reason to be connected back there. Build your mansion in shacks if that's what you want to do. But if you want your children to be okay with that, if you want your children to be excited about it, we didn't know that you are buying a $300,000 home that's going to be in debt you're going to be in debt for however long trying to pay off this mortgage. We didn't know that. We were excited about the fact that we are buying a home and we can have a place that we can call home. In Kenya, we don't have an equivalent, right? So if you're there and you're like, hey, now I'm going to go and we're going to do the foundation. It's going to cost this much. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this layout? Maybe we should consider doing this. And then the kid can now feel like, you know what, I want to have, let's say they say I want to have a bathroom in my room. It's just a matter of drawing and da-da-da. And
Correct.
now this kid can go back and like, oh, this is the room that I planned and it has a bathroom and it's mine and all of that. And that's a simple solution. You don't have to change your ways. You do have to include your children if you want it to not be a conflict.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So and
That's interesting. You still haven't taken care of Ali's issue with Finance 101.
No. I mean, to me, the way I look at it, like a lot of people are saying it, they're doing it, as an investment for financial prudence. Those are bad investments. When you have, like a passive investment out here in America that's giving you more money than whatever you're doing in Kenya, that is a bad investment because a passive investment, you're doing nothing. You're sleeping and it's giving you more money than whatever you're doing in Kenya. And I think to me, that's where sometimes if you have other reasons why you're doing it, I'm building this for my parents in Kenya, like who don't have a good place to stay. Or I'm building this because I'm a philanthropist, like I want to help the villagers. That's another thing. But when you say I'm doing this because it's an investment. When you just do, and I think there's a lot of emotions with those of us who were raised in Kenya when it comes to investing in Kenya. And you know, emotions and investment decisions sometimes don't mix well. Does Gen 1 ever think about investing, you know, with the extra money that you're making here? Do you ever think about Kenya as a place where you can invest, whatever in whatever it is?
That's a very loaded question. And it really has to do with how well we are connected. And how well we are connected has to do with our parents. So if you are a Swahili speaker, for example, then you feel easier to navigate when you go back home. That might be a thing if you're involved in the investments back home. There's some people who will invest just because they have the extra money to do so, and they're more likely probably to do what's similar to the U.S. So I have some peers who have Airbnbs and, you know, city centers close to Nairobi, that type of thing.
Okay.
But they know that they're going to get a return on their investment. They're not investing in, you know, in their homelands and the outskirts. They're not doing that. They're doing those. So those things are happening. Is it a majority of us? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. But when it comes to that, I don't think that we are having enough of a mature financial conversation for us to have an expectation for people to invest back home, because we live in America and we're not even talking about how to invest here. I know some of our parents didn't know how to do that, but we're coming of a time where we need to become expert on that, because now the following generation, not my children and those children that they're going to have, need to have that information in order to be able to live sustainably in this country with inflation and any of the things that the world might throw their way.
Let me read some comments.
Yes, go ahead and read the comments.
Let me read the ones from YouTube.
To you, okay.
I think it's not much. So from Near Generation, so she was speaking in context to what Annette was talking about. So she was like, when in Rome, adapt to your environment. The old world tools may not work. Her example of protecting kids in the West is a good one. And then Near Generation also says, you know, the part where you're talking about, you say the no. She's like, look here, I'm not an ATM.
Period.
Yeah, and she also had made a comment earlier to say that what she liked about Kenyan parents, that what Kenyan parents do right, although one of her parents only was Kenyan, she's like, they ensure you to try to get education.
Yes.
They try to make sure you have a good foundation and family support. So, you know, that's, and Nia is half Kenyan.
Yes.
So I think, is it half Canadian, half Kenyan?
She can tell us.
Yeah. Anyway,
How she identifies as.
one of her parents is Kenyan.
Okay.
So, but yeah,
That's
so,
awesome.
yeah, and she keeps up with the show. Very, very, very interesting to hear her perspectives on stuff.
Okay.
All right, so you guys have commented. Sambaza, let me just go way back a little bit. Sambaza podcast, and maybe you'll answer to this. What I've observed, and I may be wrong, but in the Muslim community, there are radicals and moderates within the community. And so we all have differences. I'm not Muslim, but I know there are some mosques in Mombasa who, if you go, you could be identified as radical. Ni hayo tu.
Let me quickly answer that question before you read those comments, because this is something as Muslims we've had to deal with for over 20 years, since 9/11. And it's interesting, these terms radical and are only attributed to Muslims most of the time. You know, and I saw this also creep into Kenya. You know, like where, you know, like you're told, because we've seen you attending that mosque, you're a radical. One thing that I've always said, and I've even mentioned before in the show, mosques operate in a very different way. Mosques have no membership, you know, and I think that's something that's very difficult for people who, you know, maybe are used to the Christian context where churches have membership. Mosques don't have membership. They don't have a register of the people who show up. You know, like wherever you go pray on Friday, you go pray at the mosque that's close to you. So there's no such thing as membership. There's a lot of these media narratives that you know, like sunk into the psyches of people, and they would even categorize you. Are you one of those radical Muslims, or are you moderate, or are you? And these are things that we've been experiencing for 20 years. But I think over time, most people have come to learn that a lot of these things that were being said, even in Kenyan media, were not necessarily true. Do we have, like preachers here and there who would sometimes preach things that are very hateful? Yes, of course we do. But these were individual preachers. A mosque doesn't preach. It's a preacher who does. And then the other thing about mosques that also people don't get is that the pastor or the imam has no ownership, or the person who leads the prayers has no ownership of the mosque.
Right.
This is also another difficulty that people have understanding, where you'd hear this church belongs to pastor so and so. So a mosque doesn't belong to the imam.
Is the imam assigned?
The imam is assigned.
Okay.
The imam is
I
assigned,
think-
and it can be changed.
I think one of the issues too is there's the media when things are very, things are in the news when an event has happened. And of course, we've seen that. But we even have, movies that are coming out today.
Yeah.
Where there's a person and they're like, okay, we're going to go to this mosque and we're going to ask this imam, and then we're going to see who the terrorists are in this place. And, it's a reoccurring theme that has occurred in our mainstream movies and media, and it has created an idea of how these things work, which is very inaccurate to what you're saying.
Yes. Yes.
But also we have an opportunity to be more critical thinkers in this time when this is the information age, and we have the ability to be on podcasts like this one, but also in other places where we can think critically and understand not everything happens in the way that we are presented, which is the Christian context in the United States. Things exist in other ways, and so hopefully this is an opportunity for our audience members to think critically about it.
Well, Huyu Annette has talked points of 1,000 people.
That was
the previous comment,
Yeah.
And I think it was
Boy.
pertaining to kids and everything and protecting them, which Washenke over here agrees protecting them now is empowering them to advocate for themselves. And of course, Kaiser Soze with his problems and the mama. We've created a culture of institutionalized begging and fed the beast of black tax pertaining to now
Yeah.
Uko
Yeah.
Sambaza.
Sending the money.
Mm-hmm.
So Nania was asking, but what is dead? But that is still dead capital or mush. That's to you.
They can capitalize my deadness.
uh,
Paula.
Kaiser So says, it's crazy because I am friendly. She feels I'm going to give her money. I offered her my land to use for free. It's 1.5 miles from Mombasa. 1.5 house.
1.5 million or miles.
Why it's 1.5 house from Mombasa. Kaiser, Ibu, correct that whatever.
What's in that context?
I don't know. This is pertaining to the mama who has been disturbing,
who has been
asking for money.
Oh, okay.
And even he offered her a piece of land to farm, but she said it's too far. Yeah, Kaiser. Next Friday we shall be told. So Ali, my house near my mahio is a waste. I bought land from AMG and I want that my dream home, but I will probably stay in Nairobi. Pertaining to your comment in terms of
the
buying
capital.
No, with Kaiser has an emotional connection. He's acknowledged it's an emotional connection. He's trying to reconnect back to like his roots. He's a descendant of slaves, and I think he's gonna be talking to us next week. He even has a petition of allowing descendants of slaves to be given citizenship within the East African community.
Good.
So we're going to be talking
Kaiser
about
and
that.
Afro-Jamaican?
It's the same person.
Oh, Afro is Kaiser and Kaiser is Afro.
Yes, Kaiser is Afro and Afro is Kaiser.
And emotion is Kaiser.
They're all those together. Mix them, gather them, put them in one bucket.
Mashakura.
Okay, and the generational basically says the parents, she's half Kenyan and half Black American. Both parents are deceased. So and that's why I remember there was some comment one time about reconnecting with Kenya, trying to get Kenyan citizenship. Very interesting, but kind of similar a little bit with Kaiser, but yeah.
Nia talk to us. I'd love for Nia to come on to the one mic show too. So that we can get that context.
Nia.
Yeah, because she has also a very unique context.
Yes.
Caribbean.
Okay, I don't know about those singing
Hater.
skills, but
Okay.
We can see.
There's Sambaza says here there's a new shift of the second generation who will actually make use of the income that the parents will have generated from property in Kenya. Not everyone will benefit from it, but there's going to be a portion of management companies that will come up to take care of those properties and therefore create residual income or passive income for the second or third generation Kenyan people.
Very wishful thinking.
To Washeke's,
Put them in a trust. That way they can't sell them, and then everything's controlled. But what do I know?
That's good. Ali's point is acknowledge an emotional investment instead of calling it wealth generation.
yeah,
Which you've said.
yeah,
And
of
which
course,
he says,
yeah.
he has actually says, in the West, we can spend 60K on a car. So building a home for 30 to 50K is not a bad thing. But hey, I am biased towards Kenya. And he says, he also says there are radical Christians. So I think this is just racism. And Washeke says, every religion has radicals. Now I hang out nena.
Mm-hmm.
Should I continue?
Now, before
Oh,
real
okay,
quick, before we before we let go,
Before we call it.
as we wrap up, I just wanted to know from Annette, are there maybe any model immigrant communities that you know about that have navigated this first and second generation conflict much better than Kenyans? Are there any model, maybe nationalities or
Don't say
communities that you
Indians.
know about? Annette.
What I would say is that let's give things the proper context. The first airlifts were when?
in the late 50s,
The late
late 50s,
50s.
early 60s.
So we're not even at 2050 or 2060 yet. So the time period in which we've been here, we've established our communities, we've grown to the numbers that we've grown. It's been a very short period of time.
Correct.
So compare it to a group of people who've had gotten federal admittance into this country, 50 years prior to that is very unfair, or any period of time prior to that is very unfair.
But within the communities that have been here for around the same period that we've been, because technically, yes, late 50s, early 60s were the airlifts, but those were going back, they were not forming families. The first generation that started forming families here, I want to say comfortably maybe 80s. Yeah. Mhm.
Right.
So is there maybe any communities that that is maybe navigating this challenge better, that maybe we can look up to and learn from?
The only thing that I would say as far is if you have a community whereby you have young people who are here in the United States speaking the native language, Hindi is spoken or Mandarin is spoken, although they have their challenges as well. And also, what other language did I see? Sometimes some African languages
Somalis.
I think Somalis,
Somalis, yeah.
or even Arabic being
I
spoken.
don't know why y'all leaving the Hispanics out. It's not like they're
I'm not
natives.
leaving the Hispanics
But those have
out.
been here
They're
for so
very
long.
different
Yeah.
demographic.
They've been here for
California
so
was
long.
Mexico.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Texas
Cinema
was
jirani hapa tu.
Mexico. Arizona was
Ne-
See,
Mexico.
there's a
Nevada-
that was annexed.
Nevada
Right.
was Mexico, yeah.
Right,
So,
and the Louisiana Purchase.
So they've
and
been here.
so if my public education gave me anything, I know that that's not a fair
But how?
comparison.
I mean, yeah, you're right. But I mean,
Although, I mean, there
they
are some
still,
communities
they
who
still
have
a lot of
similar-
similarities.
There are a lot of similarities. I recently went to see an author who is Dominican American, and she talks about those experiences growing up in the Bronx.
Yes.
And there are some who spoke Spanish and those who don't, and there are those who she talks about like
Cubans.
those whose R's don't turn the right way.
Yes.
She says in her poetic way, and so they do have those issues as well. But I don't like comparing mangoes and passion fruits and or apples and oranges, as the Wet says. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is say that a lot of these issues that we face, you'll find in the immigrant communities, are very universal to a certain extent. And the more time passes, the more liberation that we have, or the more we have the ability to kind of reinforce and push our cultures without it having a consequence. The consequences have changed since the 80s. If you didn't have children who spoke English in the 80s, they were put in ESOL and they were marked as not smart, and all of these things happen. And the consequences now is like, okay, well, we live in a world that speaks a lot of different languages, and we have an ability to advocate for them in a different way. And so that's important to note. Everything is not negative. We need to look at things at context, right? So there's no one particular group of people that I can say they did these things so wonderfully compared to us. What I'm saying is I'm one of us, and so I'm going to be one of the people who helps to make it better in the future.
Okay, so this is a challenge that generally, you know, like most other communities that are in that similar position as Kenya are also having to deal with, and they're also facing.
Right, and I have the unique position as I have the unique opportunity as a member of the New Americans Task Force in Baltimore County, where East Africans are a minority, a super minority actually, in that our numbers are not even statistically there fairly. To interact with other groups and organization leaders of other groups and ethnicities and see that they're having similar struggles. And because we're coming together, we're going to try and find solutions and make sure that they're codified in legislation in a way that is going to be advantageous for the immigrant newcomer and those who have been here for many years, for them to catch up and kind of like close that wealth gap and some of those resource access gaps that exist in our communities.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Annette. And I want to remind the listeners that Annette, you will still be seeing her here. You will be seeing more of her.
There's going to be more of Annette.
Yes, there's going to be more of Annette. This was just a dose. This was just a touch of her. She's going to be the new voice of the second geners on the One Mic show, you know, like on conversations where we're having about Kenya. She'll be bringing that perspective of someone who's lived here in the US and of course interacted with us, because there's always this very interesting perspectives, even when we're talking about political issues, social issues going on in Kenya. It's always nice to get the take. Like last week, for example, when we were interviewing Deborah Uko about her book Rough Silk, I think, you know, like if someone like Annette would have been here, there would have been very interesting questions that would have come, because most of us were coming from a perspective of nostalgia. Some of these stories that we're reading, you know, like we know these places, we know these politicians she's talking about in the book, we know some of these places that she's mentioning, and the streets she's talking about. So it's always good to have someone from the outside. Not by outside, I don't mean an outsider, but I just mean someone who's from out of the context that we have. Because we've been trying this on the One Mic show, at the very initial stages, we were accused of having too much male energy. You know, like we brought in Ruth, you know, like, and of course she brought in that new perspective, softened some of our views
supposedly,
and perspectives, which is always good.
Got Pablo tuning in.
Yes, and of course got Pablo tuning in.
He might even become our lawyer through Ruth.
And then of course now we have Annette, who's gonna be giving us firsthand the perspective of first generation Kenyans who are born here, Kenyans who were raised here, because they have a different perspective, they have different experiences, and there's different value
and
that they bring
and
to
their
the
nose are
conversations we
different.
have. And oh, sorry, what did you say again?
Their nose
are different.
Their nose are different.
Our nose are hard. Full stop.
Their nose come with explanations behind it, but it's still a no.
Yeah, and of course we have to understand why those no's are hard. You know, like, and appointed more than ours are. Unajua mazei wiki jo
kuna vile
ni kubaya.
Lakini when you own an experience.
So I want you to stay tuned. And Junoburu, karibu to the One Mic show, and congratulations.
Congratulations.
And Tanis Stuki.
It's a San June wedding.
Okay.
What?
All right.
Na wahenga walinena kilicho na mwanzo hakina budi kuwa na mwisho. Meli imetia nanga. We are about to wrap this puppy up. Amosh fire.
Why I say. Thank you, Miss Annette. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Helping brighten up the show. You know, you brought a perspective that Ali could never ever put together. Thank you so much. And you're broadening our way of thinking, of looking at stuff, of dealing with these our relas, because so we figured kiwango yetu. But with that said, see you next week. Near Generational, thank you for being on board. And yes, you're asking when will the Jamaican listener discuss his plan. He's actually going to be on next Friday.
Next Friday.
Yeah.
Yes.
So near
Kaiser Soze.
Yes, near Generational. Stay tuned. And be ready. We might have to throw some questions at you. As Kenyan who
As a half Kenyan.
half Kenyan who's trying to reconnect or is reconnecting
That's
or has
what's up.
connected.
That's what's up.
And
Welcome. Karibu, karibu.
and then also to our my friends, we also our new listeners. We've gained some new listeners as well. Thank you for coming through, and don't forget we're here each and every Friday. And with that said, I will see you guys next week.
All right. Annette, your last word.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to growing with you guys. I am going to be here to be your U.S. politics contributor and your cultural contributor for the first and second generation experience here in the U.S. So I look forward to being back here when I get here. Thank you so much.
He's gonna grow with us. Oh, sorry. I got to.
All right. Again, thank you to Annette. Thank you to all the listeners, all the viewers who are tuned in on Facebook, on YouTube, and on all other platforms that we are broadcasting from. We appreciate you because it's not easy. You could be anywhere on Friday. You could be anywhere, like kula happy, sherehe, nini, but you choose to be with us here. So we really appreciate that. We are going to be letting you know, when we're going to take a break, before Labor Weekend, because sometimes, we do, sometimes we need a break. We love you. We love hanging out with you every week, but we do need a break. But like we said earlier, we're going to have Afro-Jamaican next week, the Jamaican who wants to reconnect, and he has identified with Kenya. And we look forward to a day when it's going to be easy for all the descendants of slaves to come back to Africa in their own terms. Not necessarily to bring money, not necessarily to build the economy, but just to come in their own terms. Whether they just want to come to reconnect, whether they just want to come to tour, whatever reason, we should allow them to connect in the way they understand. Because remember, 400 years is not a short period of time. We live in a very interesting time when all those, when all the propaganda and all the falsities that were being told on both sides have fallen apart. The gatekeepers of information are gone with the internet. And that's the reason why you see a lot of young people coming to visit African countries, and they're not falling for those narratives, that you're going to get kidnapped, all your stuff will get stolen, you're going to get killed. You can get killed right here in DC. In fact, you're more likely to get killed right here in DC than get killed, in an African country, because we know gun violence. That when you watch the local news,
more like Republicans.
Yes, but if you watch the local news in any city that you go, it is almost standard. Almost every day, there will be, a news report on a shooting. It's like standard operating procedure. So, so the gatekeepers of information are gone, and the cat is out of the bag. Black people are talking to each other from different sides of the world, and we're looking forward to a day when things are going to be better for us and when we're going to be making movement. Na kwa hayo machache, yote ambaye anataka kunipigia simu, nambari yangu bado ni ile 1-800 mteule. Na operator akishika simu, mwambie unataka kusema na mjukuu. Na akikuuliza ni mjukuu yupi, mkumbushe ni mjukuu yule wa Masai. Because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui, na sibagui. Kwaherini.
Washake Ndirango has accused me of not reading her comments. So there's this one comment that I think I may have missed. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The most painful thing is how we deny our kids essentials here while funding dead capital and entitlement relatives.
Absolutely. 100% on point, like a decimal.
Aiden, daddy loves you. Jerry, daddy loves you. Nemo, daddy loves you. Until next week, be blessed. Budabas! Abosh!
Big shout out to Vince on the beat, by the way. Yeah, remember that time I say that God's gonna happen, though. Silly shafunguka, I'm getting everything I'm